On Sound City Council, it's April 27th, 2015. We've been meeting in camera since 4:30 this afternoon, and we're now moving into the regular meeting. If you're watching at home and you want to follow along with the agenda, go to onsound.ca/council-minutes-and-agendas, and then pick the year and pick the date. Number 3 on our agenda is a moment of silent reflection. Looks like we'll discuss this later. Looks like it'll be the last time we do this. I'll get everyone to stand for a moment of silent reflection. Okay. Thank you. Number 4, any additional items to add to the list? Councillor Kepke.
Thank you, Your Worship. Tonight I have 2 items, one regarding Festival of Northern Lights, and I won't be talking turkey, but I'll be talking chicken and egg.
Nobody here but us chickens. Brian? Sorry, Councillor O'Leary.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll be talking about the big bike event with the Heart and Stroke.
Councillor McManaman.
Thank you, Worship. 2 items, one about the upcoming Kiwanis 90th anniversary and the other one about the Community and Summer Activities Guide.
Councillor Gregg, did I see your hand up? No, so somebody else over there. I was going to call you Councillor. What a demotion, Mr. Backing, Director of Operations.
Thank you, Your Worship. Staff are recommending, Your Worship, that item 12A10 be tabled and referred back to the Operations Committee for further analysis. I gather there's been communication late today that is relevant to the issue.
Okay, so we can deal with that when it comes up on the agenda and just table it at that point? I'm going to go that way. Anything else over there? Okay. Deputy Mayor Wright.
Thank you very much. I just mentioned the hospice walk on Sunday.
Boy, full slate. Councillor Thomas, Councillor Dodd, Councillor Lemon.
Yes, Your Worship, I have something pertaining to the federal budget, or lack thereof.
And I have 2 items which will be, just want to update everyone on the list of things that I've been doing. And of course, we received a letter this afternoon, or this morning perhaps, from the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing with regard to our request for to be identified as a disaster area. Good. Number 5, disclosure of pecuniary interest. Any? Seeing none, thank you. Confirmation of the minutes.
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor O'Leary, that the minutes of the regular council meeting held on April 13 as printed be adopted.
Thank you. And all in favor? That is carried. Number 7, resolution, moving council into committee of the whole.
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor O'Leary, that City Council now go into committee of the whole to consider public meetings, deputations, public question period, matters arising from correspondence, reports, matters tabled, motions for which notice was previously given, and other business.
Great. Thank you. All in favor? It's carried. So we're at number 8, which is public meetings, and we do not have any public meetings. And number 9 is where we get to have fun. Deputations. Last week, last meeting, we had we got to honor the Volunteers of the Year, and this week, we get to honor all the other volunteers that have helped us throughout the year. I might as well do it from here, since I'm not giving out an award. I would like to take a few moments to recognize a special group of people that give a lot of their personal time serving the city committees and helping at city events and facilities. Our volunteers, being just the city's volunteers, come from many different backgrounds and varying in age. In 2014, we had close to 200 dedicated volunteers. One thing they all have in common is their willingness to generously give their time and expertise without any expectation of reward. Tonight, we honor and celebrate them, and we have quite a few here in the room. On behalf of City Council, I'd like to thank the volunteers of the City of Owen Sound for their commitment, energy, and time they dedicate to their community. We could not have accomplished so many things in 2014 without their help. They have made a big difference in our city, and for this, we thank them. So thank you to the volunteers. And this being Volunteer Month, it's not just our 200, which is an amazing number that volunteer within the city, to the city, on various committees and doing various things. Think about where the city would be without minor sports, without people volunteering, churches without volunteering, the hospital without volunteers. Jim mentioned earlier Kiwanis Club, all the social clubs, et cetera, that do so much work in our community volunteer. And sometimes I think we have an advantage in the community the size that we have, that everybody knows each other, we look after each other, and we do so well with volunteers, and it works so well for our community. We'd be lost without all the volunteers, and for that we thank you and thank all the volunteers in the city. Thanks. Our next deputation is from David McLaren, Graeber's Labour Council, and now, I had Linda Bumstead, but I believe there's a replacement. Yep, oh, there we go. Public Health Manager, Graeber's Health Unit, with regard to the National Day of Mourning for workers killed or injured on the job. Welcome, thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Monica Bantz from the Health Unit is here with me. And we're here again, well, not again, but again, it's April the 28th, which is the National Day of Mourning for workers who are injured and killed on the job. Since this began in Canada, roughly 1991, it has now began in Canada, but has now spread to 80 countries. So it now is an international day of mourning, an international ceremony that we observe. I'm wondering if you have all had a chance to take a look at this, more or less? Okay, good. Then I'm just going to hit some highlights and allow Monica to pick up some indicators of how this is affecting folks here in Grey and Bruce. There's roughly over 900 workers are killed in Canada every year, and nearly 250,000 hours are lost to injuries and illnesses. Now it's a lot more actually, because they figure that only maybe 40 or 50% of all injuries are actually reported to workmen's compensation boards. There's been some organizations who have crunched the numbers on a bigger scale, and worldwide, nations lose perhaps 4% of their GDP every year from worker deaths and injuries. $6 billion a year is what it costs us in Ontario, the economic burden for only 57,000 approved lost time claims. And again, there's a lot of time claims that are not approved, and these are statistics from the workers' compensation boards of only approved and recognized claims. I'm struck by, and I should also say that 30%, not all of the costs that employers hand out in premiums are covered. Only those costs that employers put into workers' compensation cover maybe 30%. 30% are covered by workers themselves, and that includes everything from having to hire people to come in and do chores, to lost employment, to services that are not covered by the healthcare system or by workmen's comp. But 40% of the costs of workers' injuries are picked up by the taxpayer. That's you and me. And again, that's because not all of the costs are covered by workmen's compensation. I'm struck by, there was an interesting study that was done in the U.S. Who do a very good job of monetizing costs. And they have looked at other kinds of workplace stressors. And this is things like low autonomy in a workplace, not feeling that your voice is being heard in a workplace, harassment, unemployment finally. A lot of the things that we know precarious workers suffer from. If you remember, I was here about a month or so ago talking to you about precarious work, and these are all things, these stressors are all things that some workers in our area suffer from. But in the United States, they've managed to put a number to that, and they attribute 120,000 deaths every year just to these workplace stressors. They don't have to be manufacturing or mining or whatever. They could be clerical for that matter. And that takes up a chunk of about 5 or 8% of healthcare costs in the U.S. This is a serious problem, not only for the workers who are injured and their families who have to cope, but also for communities and countries. It's a huge expense. So Monica's brought a little bit of information locally, so I'm going to turn it over to her for a moment, and I'll wrap up afterwards.
Thank you. So I think I just was asked to come and present some of our statistics locally. I think very often we look at the picture for Ontario, and then often people ask, well, really, what does that have necessarily to do with us? And so some of the statistics from our epidemiologist, Alana Leffley, include information for our communities locally. So really, we're looking at some of the injury costs. And granted, some of these injury rates, they're not necessarily specifically related only to workplace, but some of the trends, I guess, are what are really concerning. So if we look at injury rates for Grey and Bruce compared to the rest of Ontario, some of the things that are significant is that our overall rate of injuries, and so people going to need emergency room visits, is 101 times greater 101% greater than the rest of Ontario. And so I think when we look at a couple of other specific age groups related to this, or specific populations, as an example, falls, and falls throughout the lifespan. So we're not necessarily speaking specifically about elders or seniors having falls. We're talking about all different ages. So we know that our falls rate in Grey and Bruce is 72% higher than the Ontario average. So I think some of the differences, if it was a matter of 5 and 10%, maybe we wouldn't be as concerned, but 72% higher than the general Ontario rate is significant. Another population that we're fairly concerned about is our ratio of injuries for men. So we know that for men experiencing injuries, they have a rate of ongoing illness 60% higher than for women in similar types of life and work circumstances. So we have a lot of members of our workforce who are still affected by injuries. And once again, this is statistically significant for Grey and Bruce compared to the rest of Ontario. One of the other types of work that is included in David's document is looking at different types of employment which are considered high risk for workplace injuries. So that's including things like health and social services, manufacturing and retail. And in Grey and Bruce, we have a different population as well, so looking at farm and agriculture. So when we compare ourselves to other communities around Grey and Bruce, so Huron, Perth, Oxford, we have a 72% higher rate of injuries related to farm and agricultural work here in Grey Bruce compared to our neighbors. So I think what this speaks to is a need for a bit of a call to action. And I think it's something that is on public health's list of priorities in the next upcoming years to be addressing and hopefully reducing our rates of injuries, and as a follow-up for David's work around workplaces as well.
I just wanted to say that some folks from the Personal Service Workers Union, this SEIU, wanted to be here, but they're working, of course, with their clients. But one of the stewards sent me some information, and she said that they've lost 4 workers in the last 10 years to car accidents alone, 3 from this area. So it's ironic that the workers, the personal service workers, who are doing such a great job of keeping people out of hospital, are themselves victims of injury and death, and themselves needing these kinds of services. They are amongst the lowest paid still in the healthcare system, and yet they are in a rather risky job because they got to get to their clients at all seasons, at all hours of the night. I wanted to also end and tell you a story. When I was doing some research on precarious work, I went down to Timmy's in Owen Sound and sort of sat around and talked to folks down there about what their work experiences were. And one of the guys came up and said, or I was standing outside, and so we got to chatting, and he said that he'd been working in the quarries in Wyerton for 30 years. And in that time, he had been hospitalized 11 times. Seriously. But there was not, now I'm sure he got workman's comp, and he may have got disability as well. But I'm sure that did not make up for all the costs that he had. No union, and very little chance of refusing work, because one of the things that we're finding with folks, especially in this precarious economy, in small areas, people are afraid to refuse work, even if it's dangerous, simply because they're afraid that they won't be hired or they will be fired and not hired by anybody else. My own grandson, and this is in a larger area down in Guelph, my own grandson graduated from high school, got his first job. He was in a factory setting, and they were cleaning bins and using the harsh chemicals to clean the bins. Without a lot of experience and certainly not very much training, he was put on the line, and when the bins came down, they still had some of that harsh chemical in them. Now, they gave him an apron to protect his upper part, but they didn't give him any boots. Well, wait a minute now, I'm sorry, that's wrong. They did give him boots, but what happened was that the stuff sloshed, the chemical sloshed out of one of the bins and down his apron into the gap of his boots, and his boots filled up with harsh chemicals. And he was immediately hospitalized for a couple of days, and of course he's still not back at work. So his income is no longer going into the family. It occurred to me when I was thinking about these things that unions used to do this job. The union membership has dropped precariously in the last little while. It used to be about 30% or more, 40% of workers were unionized in the private sector, and now it's down to about 13%. And that's unfortunate because the unions did a very good job of training their own members and of training employers as well, and making sure that workplaces were safe. So the unions that are behind this day of mourning keep reminding us of the kinds of services that they provided to keep workers safe. And if you keep your workers safe, you will keep your costs down. So that's really all I had to say. I'm really pleased to see that Mayor Boddy will be with us tomorrow at 11 o'clock for a short ceremony. And I would invite anyone else on council to come out as well. It won't be long. I hope it's warm. And we'll see you
So
tomorrow.
we'll be raising a flag at 11 o'clock here at City Hall in front.
That's right.
And this is the only flag that we raise after passing a bylaw a number of years ago to stop doing proclamations and flags. This is the one that we do annually.
The Day of Mourning Flag.
Yeah, just so everyone understands.
Thank
that.
you, Council.
Great, thank you very much. Next on our list, 9C, is Camellia Cole, Moragan Budgeon, Fresh First Friday event.
Is this on, or do I need to press it?
No, it's on.
It's on. That was very sobering and important information. We're going to lighten it up a little bit, but it was, yeah. Camille and I, my name's Morag Budgeon. This is Camille Cole, and we belong to a group called Boost. Your Worship, Council, ladies and gentlemen, city staff, we're here to tell you about our committee and about an event we're bringing up shortly. I was laughing, Camille and I were on this side, and this side was full. I was wondering if this was the groom's side, or then I thought, I think it's the camera. I think the camera looks straight through here, and so I've been trying really hard not to scratch inappropriately and say, hi, Mom, if that's what it is. We're here this evening, as I said, to introduce you to this new business group named Boost, which stands for Businesses and Organizations of Owen Sound Together. We'd like to educate you and invite you to an exciting event that we're sponsoring called Fresh First Fridays. I'm going to give you a brief history of Boost. Camille of Dr. Cobbler had heard of First Fridays in other communities and was very intrigued by the idea. She and her husband, Ron, had recently relocated their store onto Main Street they were across from Timmy's and moved it onto Main Street, and it seemed like a great opportunity to introduce people to the new store. Using Camille's great, vast Facebook community to reach the public, they created their own unique version of First Friday, and it was a huge success. Customers commented on the nostalgia the evening evoked, remembering a time when stores were open on Friday nights in Owen Sound. Most of us remember that. It was clear that the success of the night had to be repeated, and by including other businesses, it would enhance and strengthen the experience. So Camille approached many shops in town, and everyone was really open and receptive to the idea. But there was a common thread that emerged. Businesses were very excited about getting in touch with one another. That desire to connect was very evident last week at a social mixer that the DIA put on at the H2O Lounge. The place was packed and humming with business kinship. It was quite exciting. It was great to see everybody, all these businesses downtown together, communicating, talking, socializing. So in December, 12 stores participated in the second installment of First Friday, and again, it was a great success. So in the interest of encouraging the growth of First Friday, Camille called a meeting at Dr. Cobbler of people she knew and people that she wanted to know. Representatives from City Council, the DIA, the Tom Thompson Memorial Art Gallery, and a cross-section of businesses attended. And out of this assembly, Boost was born. Boost is a devoted, sort of our mission statement that we've hammered out is Boost is devoted to working and communicating with other businesses and groups to invigorate and promote downtown Owen Sound. We're about building bridges between our business communities and with our clientele. The downtown improvement area is charged with beautifying our shopping center and bringing patrons to our doors, but Boost is committed to working with the DIA to enhance the customer service of downtown Owen Sound. So DIA brings the people downtown. They do a fantastic job. We think more about what goes on inside our store once you go through the door. How do we combine and communicate and work together on that, getting everybody in our stores. This is a really dynamic and positive committee with a highly action-oriented, I did that sentence wrong. We are highly action-oriented, and we have plenty of energy and ideas. Camille's joke was when we were coming up with the idea of Boost, many people have Boost, we're boosting, everybody's good feelings about town, but she did say that it's a nutritional supplement for Owen Sound, thinking of the other Boost. Camille has contacted everybody in downtown Owen Sound, and I'm thrilled to say that well over 30 businesses, restaurants, and shops will be open Friday, May 1st from 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. for our inaugural Fresh First Friday. This is going to be a quarterly event with tentatively 50s First Friday in August, Festive First Friday in December, and Frisky First Friday in February. You can tell, oh, God, I saw that look, Ian. We're obviously very mad about alliteration. We love alliteration. Each store will create their own atmosphere and experience, whether it be music, sales specials, promotions, workshops. It's up to them to create what they want, music, nibblies. And the DIA is providing us with lime green balloons that will be positioned outside of all the stores participating. And the poster that you see here will be on all the windows. So if you walk downtown now, you can see this poster on many windows, and you know that they will be open on that Friday night. Wilma's Flower Shop has created a signature bouquet of flowers that each of the stores will have. So everybody's really working together. The DIA, City Council, you've been great in helping us move this forward and supportive. We're really thrilled, and we're working to create a really great adventure in the valley. People will want to come downtown to Owen Sound and come back to our downtown. So I'm here to invite everyone here to join us and celebrate First Friday, this Friday, May 1st, from 6 till 9. Thank you.
Thanks.
I just wanted to say thank you to Morag for presenting that. I'm definitely a more emotional, sort of from the cuff kind of speaker, and so that in the interest of me not crying on camera,
Yes.
Morag
She's very
was my
passionate.
voice. So, and just as she said, I greatly appreciate all of the support that we've had. It's been an absolute blessing, so thank you.
Thanks.
Well, from a guy that grew up on Main Street with Dad having a clothing store, and I remember being open every Friday night, and I remember cars cruising from the old arena to Harrison Park with too many people in them probably, and people on the street, and everyone went to the downtown restaurants and then wandered around and went shopping, and then all the teenagers went to the movie theaters after and threw boxes of popcorn at the screen and did. It used to be great, and it's really great that you're getting that atmosphere back, and hopefully we can change people's habits and get them coming back downtown, and Friday nights are so much fun. When they've turned on the Festival of Northern Lights the past couple of years, and that Friday night, there's been that old atmosphere that I grew up with and really appreciated, and it's starting to come back, and we see it, and I think we see it with some of the new stores that are coming in downtown that are changing the atmosphere down there. And Tipping Point, I think it's starting to tip. It's going really well. Thank you to Camille especially, and everybody that has joined her. It's been great. Thanks. Yes, go ahead, Councillor Lemon, please.
Well, first of all, I think it's a wonderful idea, because I too remember the Friday night. I never tossed the popcorn boxes at the screen at the Roxy or the Center. Well, I never got caught. But I think going back to that, which was a tradition for many, many years, you couldn't move in downtown Owen Sound. And I can remember we would go to the restaurant and have greasy fries and gravy, and cherry Coke, as I remember, was one of the things. But anyway, congratulations. And I certainly feel that this is a good initiative, and it's the kind of thing that will be successful because it's bottom up. Nobody's forcing you to do it. It's what you want to do, so your heart will be in it. And I really appreciate what you're doing and have done, and I wish you all the best. And I'm hoping at some point we'll start to do that during the summertime when our visitors are here, and let them have a taste of Owen Sound.
I think at this point, this is sort of, because we're so new and fresh, we're starting with this quarterly event, but we've got some great ideas and great ideas for the downtown and for when the visitors are here. And windows, there's all kinds of great ideas that we have. This is where we're starting, and I'm really looking forward to working with Camille and to see all the amazing things that we can do to help invigorate downtown.
Well, and I realize you're just starting, and to do 4 events in the first year is huge. And I recognize that, but I'm just wondering about next summer. I'm looking ahead, because I think this will be a success.
Yeah, and that's what we're so thrilled that council is being so supportive. And when we met with Pam and Mayor Boddy, they've been so supportive and helping us, telling us things that we can do, thinking as well about putting things on the sidewalk, having tables and chairs out. You know, after this one, I think that probably there'll be more focus on restaurants getting involved and making it a real event. As you said, there's no movie theaters anymore, but plays and there's so much opportunity here.
And we could even bring back an old-fashioned street dance.
Wouldn't that be fun?
Oh, yeah, they were a blast.
Yes, that's what we're thinking with the 50s First Friday, too. There, you could have cars down there. You could have a movie. You could screen. There's so many things. It just goes on and on and on. It's almost too big sometimes. But, yeah, there's exciting ideas, and we're really receptive to hear them. So if anybody has ideas they'd like to bring to Camille or myself, Camille's at Dr. Cobbler, I'm at the Owen Sound Artist Co-op, we would love to hear them.
Great. Thank you. So I want to thank both sets of speakers that were in tonight. It's good presentations. Next is number 10, public question period. Is there any public questions? Anyone that wants to ask? Going the other way? Okay, good. Correspondence received for which direction of council is required, and I see no correspondence on our list. So that gets us to number 12. 12A1 is a report from Deputy Clerk with regard to public appointment, the Owen Sound Downtown Improvement Area Board of Management. Go ahead.
Yes, through you, Your Worship. There are 2 vacancies on the DAA board, and the DAA board is requesting that council approve the appointment of Francesca Dobman to the board. At the in-camera meeting on April 13th, council reviewed the application material from Ms. Dobbin and directed that staff bring forward an open report and bylaw.
Great, thank you. Councillor Lemon?
Your Worship, it's with pleasure I would move the recommendation. I think this is going to be great for the DIA because Francesca certainly is an idea person and a hard worker.
And we need to discuss it. All in favor? That's what I thought. Good, carried. Thank you. 12A2 from Deputy Clerk again, amendment to procedural bylaw with regard to faith blessing or moment of silent reflection. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. In accordance with the city's procedural bylaw, the council agenda includes a faith blessing or moment of silent reflection. On April 15th, the Supreme Court of Canada ruled that a municipal council in Quebec cannot open its meetings with a prayer as it infringes on freedom of conscience and religion. This report is being presented to council to provide the opportunity to review the city's current practice. Should council wish to amend the city's procedural bylaw, a public meeting must be held. A notice will need to be provided at least 2 weeks prior to enactment of the bylaw. It would be staff's recommendation that the public meeting be held on May 11th, with the bylaw coming forward at the May 25th council meeting.
Great, thank you. Okay, Deputy Mayor Wright?
Yes, I'll move the recommendation.
Okay. Got it in front of me. Just want to be clear. So you're moving to...
Do you want me to read it out?
Yeah, to amend, just so we're all clear on what the bylaw or what you're moving.
I'm moving that we approve an amendment to bylaw 2007-242, being a bylaw to regulate the proceedings of the meeting of the Council of the Corporation of the City of Owen Sound and its committee to remove the faith blessing or moment of silent reflection from the regular council agenda format. Direct the deputy clerk to provide notice of an amendment to the procedural bylaw in accordance with policy CRS C29 and rescind city policy number CRS C3S, I believe, 3C35.
Great, Councillor. Thank you. Councillor Lemon?
Well, in reading what I have of the Supreme Court decision, the moment of silent reflection, I can't understand why anybody would object to that. Because we're not saying you have to pray, we're just giving some silent reflection. So I cannot support that recommendation at this time because I feel that's in a different category. It's non-sectarian. It isn't necessarily Christian, it isn't Jewish, it isn't Muslim, it isn't agnostic or atheist. It's everyone can have a few moments to reflect.
Any further comments? Councillor McManaman?
Your Worship, to the clerk, so why is moment of silent reflection included in the motion?
Through Your Worship, this matter was discussed in our in-camera meeting.
Do you want me to blurt it out? Because we got a legal opinion, and frankly, me having read the Supreme Court of Canada decision, we have to walk a fine line of neutrality, that we must be neutral to anybody that believes or does not believe in any religion. And it potentially could be another difficult point that we could be challenged on going forward.
Thank you for that, Your Worship.
Other comments? Deputy Mayor Wright?
Thank you very much. As has been mentioned, we have received legal opinion on this, as has the county, and I believe that although it's not something that we are very anxious to do, I don't think that we should go against legal advice. We cannot afford, the city cannot afford to run into any interference, breaking the law, basically is what is how I feel. I think that that we have had to deal with this before, and now we have to deal with it again. And to say that it's, I believe it's a sad day in Canada when we have to do this sort of thing. It is breaking the law if we continue. So I'm going to ask that you call the question.
Okay, and all in favor of the motion? And opposed? And that is carried. In the interim, I believe we have to waive our bylaw or that section of our bylaw until we can go through the public meeting process to amend the bylaw. So I think I need a motion from someone to waive the bylaw until we change the bylaw. Is that accurate? That's accurate. Councillor Kepke?
I'll move that motion, Your Worship, that we waive the rulings in the procedural bylaw.
Okay, any discussion to that? All in favor? Opposed? Same, it's carried. Thank you. 12A3, Director of Community Services and Manager of Economic Development and Tourism, with regard to the CP station on the east side of the harbor.
Thank you, Your Worship. In 2010, the city did purchase the CP train station, and at that time it was designated under the Ontario Heritage Act and also had a Ontario Heritage easement placed on the property. Since the goal of the city at that time was to find a tenant to lease the building, and that the redevelopment of the property would serve as a catalyst to waterfront development and also manage environmental risk for the city. Since the city purchased the building, a number of capital upgrades have been done to the exterior of the building. These have been done through the benefit of 2 Ontario Heritage Trust anonymous grants for $100,000, as well as the Rural Economic Development Fund and a small amount from the city's facade grant program. Only $11,500 has been spent from tax-supported capital. To date, we've spent $186,000 on the exterior of the building. The interior of the building has been cleaned, however, it's been left primarily in order that any work inside can reflect the needs of a tenant. Last August, Council considered a report with respect to an RFP that had been completed for the lease of the building and asked for staff to enter into negotiations toward a letter of intent and a formal lease with a preferred tenant who was identified and commence the process to declare the land surplus. In order that we can have a more detailed understanding of costs and which will help inform our lease discussions, it's important that we understand with some accuracy the costs for certain exterior works. So I would ask Mr. Smith to put up the sketch of the property if he could. So the purpose of this report is really to describe the exterior capital works, the engineering cost to do that, and then on ideas on how we move forward. So this is really just a schematic or illustrative drawing. The CP station is in gray. Regardless of any tenant, we need a parking lot for about 30 cars on the property and some areas for pedestrians to access the site. So those on-site works include the parking lot, sidewalk, patio, and landscaping to support any tenant. The estimated cost for that work is about $188,000. The city's commitment to that has always been that we will deal with the environmental issues outside. The off-site works, you can see 12th Street just at the lower right-hand corner of that sketch. We have a failed storm sewer within that right-of-way, and we need to replace that storm sewer which serves as a sanitary bypass and also the sanitary into the building. The cost for that work is about $77,000 for a total of $265,000. Any on-site works can't proceed in advance of the city doing work in that right-of-way. So in terms of next steps, it makes some sense for economic and practical reasons that we have one engineering firm to do this design work. The estimate to do the on-site design is $10,000 and the off-site $15,000. Again, this will allow a more precise understanding of the cost to actually construct these works, which is important for our lease negotiations. So in the budget this year, you have $22,000 set aside for interior work with respect to the environment. The idea is that we'll borrow some of that money to help fund the engineering work, and we'll actually use some money that's still sitting there from the Ontario Heritage Trust to complete the interior works. The Trust has advised that they will consider that work as eligible for that grant. So the recommendation, Your Worship, is that in consideration of the report, that you would direct staff to initiate the process to obtain 3 quotes for the required engineering design work, and that this work be awarded and completed with an upset limit of $15,000, and you request the manager of economic development and tourism to complete the negotiation of the lease based on that information.
Great, thank you. Questions, comments? Motions? Councillor Thomas?
I'd move the recommendation, Your Worship.
Okay, any other comments? Obviously not. Go ahead.
I just want to point out that we've all had the luxury of going through this building rather recently, and if anyone has not seen that during the open house, you should definitely try to take advantage of seeing this because this is a beautiful building, and just to see this kind of landscape work on and what it could be is really beautiful.
Good. Thank you. So all in favor of the motion? That is carried. Thank you. And next one, 12A4, report again from Director of Community Services with regard to council resolution regarding residential development charge. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Your Worship. The development charge bylaw that was presented and approved by council includes a requirement that at the time of a building permit, the applicant is required to pay, either by cash or certified check, the full residential development charge of $7,008. Upon receiving residential occupancy, as per the building code, within 12 months of taking out the permit, the bylaw provides that the city would refund that total charge. At its meeting March 30th, council had asked that we look at whether the city's DC bylaw could be amended to have the developer sign a development charge agreement at the time of obtaining a building permit, and that the charge be added to the property taxes with the notice being registered on title of the agreement, or alternative options. So the way the bylaw is structured, developers today have 12 months from the date a permit is issued to obtain occupancy. The holiday is in place for a 2-year period. It ends March 1, 2017. So as long as you have a building permit, the holiday would apply. So the request by council suggests that any residential building permit taken out during the first 2 years of the bylaw would be provided the opportunity to not pay a DC, provided you were done within 12 months of the end of the second year, which would be March 1, 2018. So in response to that direction by council, we did, as you requested, speak to Mr. Scanlon, and his comments are included in an appendix to the report that can be summarized by saying that under the Development Charges Act and our current bylaw, you can have a delayed payment agreement. You wouldn't have to amend the DC bylaw. A notice can be registered on title. It is costly to register that notice. It encumbers the property, and it would be a small fee to remove that charge. So we call that the delayed payment agreement option, and the pros and cons of that are outlined for council in a chart. But it is costly. It does encumber title to the property. Staff administration and tracking might be taxing. Staff were also asked to look at other options. We explored the idea if the development charge could simply be added as a charge against the taxes on a property at the time of the issuance of a building permit. This approach would see the charge of $7,008 added to the tax roll at the same time the building permit was being issued. If the construction was not completed by the timeline that you've established, so 12 months from the end of the second year of the holiday, so March 1, 2018, the amount would then be due for payment. There would not be interest penalty accrued during that time. If no residential occupancy permit had been issued, the fee would just be collected the same as overdue taxes. So in terms of the pros and cons, again, we've outlined those in a chart for council, but on a positive side, it's not required to be registered on title. It does require an amendment to the DC bylaw to allow us to do this. We've given you a draft bylaw schedule for your review. I would just note there's an error in Schedule B3. Year 3, the holiday ends, but to do that amendment, we do have to give notice under the Development Charges Act. So the recommendation is that council support the tax roll approach as described in the report, and we would request the city clerk give notice in accordance of the requirements of the DC Act. We would hold a public meeting, and following that public meeting, we would bring back an amendment to the bylaw.
I've got you, Councillor Lamb. Starting off, the Councillor O'Leary had his hand up first. I've got you.
Thank you, Your Worship. First of all, I wanted to thank Acting City Manager, Mr. Ritchie, and his staff for coming up with this idea. I think it's going to make a big difference to our contractors. They don't have to fork out the money ahead of time. And with that, I'll move the recommendation.
Great, thank you. Councillor Kepke?
Thank you, Your Worship. The question I have is, we agreed to a phase-in amount after that, so that phase-in amount would apply as opposed to the $7,008 in those phase-in years? Is that correct?
Through you, Your Worship, you're correct. In year 3, if you're getting a permit in year 3, March 2nd, that year, you would pay $5,000 in year 1, and you wouldn't get any refund in that year.
Councillor Lemon?
I will strongly support this motion. I think this is a great improvement over where we are, and I hope we can hold that public meeting as quickly as possible so that we can get on. I mean, we're starting into the building season, and let's go full bore to get this done as quickly as possible. I think this is good news. It sends a clear message to development, which I think is very, very important. And I'm hoping we can do I don't know how long we have to give for the public meeting. I'm sure there's a statutory requirement. I would ask Ms. Kohler how long we have to give notice.
Through you, Your Worship, the notice period is 20 days.
So 3 weeks from tonight, we could have the public meeting. Okay, thank you. I support, and I think we should move it ahead as quickly as possible. Let's get development going. Development creates a huge number of jobs, and the general rule is 40 to 50% of the cost of a new home goes into labor, and most of that labor is going to be from the local labor force, and that's good news for the local economy.
Councillor Thomas?
I'd just like to chime in with my thanks for staff. You know, it's been a bit of a struggle over the past couple of months coming up with the right formula here, but I think we finally hit on something that will have the desired effect in the community. And I just want to say to Councillor O'Leary, what a great pleasure it is to be able to support a motion he's made here in the council chambers.
Councillor McManaman?
Thank you. Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, it will be a pleasure to support Councillor O'Leary for a change on a motion. Couple of questions. The first one, so if I'm to understand this, the charge would be put on the taxes, and if occupancy doesn't occur, it would stay on the taxes. A concern that was raised, I think, by Councillor Dodd last meeting, so before that house is sold to a new homeowner, though, the taxes must be cleared, they must be paid in full? So I guess my point is it's not just downloading it onto the homeowner, perhaps a new homeowner comes in and finds out at the last minute that there's $8,000 or $7,000 owing on taxes.
Through you, Your Worship, I guess there is always a risk, and that would be between the buyer and the seller. But to prevent that, a couple of things generally happen. When you're buying a property, typically your lawyer asks for a report on the status of the municipal taxes. So if there hadn't been an occupancy permit issued, that would show up on the report. Secondly, it would be a very odd circumstance that you would be buying and trying to move into a home where there wasn't residential occupancy permit having been issued. So is it a possibility? Yes. Staff will be tracking these both in our property management system and through the tax roll, and we will certainly be doing our best, but there is a small risk to the purchaser that they could buy something and not be aware.
And so I support this change. I think it's an innovative, another innovative way to ensure that ensuring the goals of this council, which were to see development happen, but also to fund our infrastructure. Just 2 points I would make. The first would be we received 2 letters on this. This solution does not answer either one of those letters. Both letters asked for a complete holiday. This is not that. So it'll be interesting during the public meeting process if we hear from those two letters we received already, because this does not answer the concerns that were raised in those letters. That would be my first point. The second one would be, this is a change to the bylaw as it's structured. In the past, we had talked about building, getting a building permit, building within a year, getting occupancy, within the year, to spur development right now. This change would see it, you get a building permit now, you would have the 2-year holiday to get the building permit, which is a slight distinction, but still one. If you got a building permit tomorrow, you would have 2 years, not the one, as we've intended. That's correct, Ms. Coulter? I'm seeing some shaking heads around the council table. I just want to make sure I'm right.
You would have until March 1st, 2018 to get your occupancy permit.
Correct. So this is a change. That point is a change from our last, the current bylaw. It's a change from the current bylaw. If that's the wish of council, I'm not going to, let's move forward with this. I would just point out that could be counterproductive in the first year. There would be no incentive at all to do it in year one, to do it this year, 2015, because you would have 2 years to do it, which does slightly go against what we talked about was development right now. But anyway, that's the motion, that's the report, and those are my comments. Thank you, Worship.
Deputy Mayor Wright.
Thank you very much. I'm sort of along the line of Councillor McManaman, but I guess the message that, I guess my message is to the developers now, that I'm saying that now councils, we've basically gone our way towards you, and I'm asking them to now come towards us. I would like to see development. I would like to see homes built on spec. This weekend I traveled through Meaford, Thornbury, Town of Blue Mountains, and Collingwood. They're building on spec over there like crazy. So when people come to the community, they've got houses to look at. You come into Owen Sound to live in Owen Sound, there's nothing for them to look at. They're all older homes. There's no place for them to go to look for development. So unless you want to build a home yourself, and that's certainly that's wonderful. We hope that they do. But I would like to see the developers now start making a move.
Councillor Thomas.
Without belaboring this too much, I did just want to comment on Councillor McManaman's comment, and that change came about through discussions we had at the Economic Development Committee when the Economic Development Manager pointed out to me that in fact the bylaw that we'd put together didn't really match the building cycle as he understands it, and that for many builders it would be very difficult to achieve what we were looking for in a year, or in some cases even in the 2-year frame. So again, it was just a tool to try and make this as flexible and as effective as possible.
Great, thank you. Councillor Lemon, I'll get you to be short, and then I think
I
Councillor
will.
Lurie's gonna
Your
wrap up.
worship, I very simply think exactly the opposite. It takes time to get the cycle going. Last year, we had very, very low number of building permits for residential construction issued. People have to get site plans in, they have to get possibly a plan of subdivision in, and that all takes time. And so this is really going to send a very clear message out to builders. And I honestly can't see the builders objecting to this because it's not exactly what they asked for. I think it's actually better.
I'm going to let Mr. Ritchie go next, and then to Councillor
If
O'Leary
I
to
could, Your
wrap it up.
Worship, your development team met with some developers from town just this week who mentioned specifically the development bylaw was an influence in their decision to move ahead. So certainly already we've seen some impact.
Good, thank you. Councillor O'Leary can wrap it up.
Yeah, just call the question, please.
Oh, good. All in favor? It's carried. Good, thank you. 12A5, Director of Community Services is on the hot seat again. Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act. Compliance strategy.
Thank you, Worship. The Act has accessibility standards in 5 areas: customer service, employment, information and communication, and transportation. In 2014, through Accessibility Advisory Committee, this council approved a multi-year accessibility plan. That was led by a corporate accessibility team and a lead plan that really identified a staff lead for each of the subcomponents in those different pillars of accessibility, who was to assume responsibility for ensuring the city moved toward compliance with each of those areas. So in 2016, on January 1, the last of the standard, the design of public space standard comes into effect. And in order to get ready for that, we're recommending that we take a very similar approach, where staff would work in the different areas they've been assigned. You'll see in the chart responsibility to different areas. So the design of public space standard affects recreational trails, beach access, public eating areas, play spaces, paths of travel, accessible parking, obtaining service, and maintenance. Just to be clear, it doesn't apply retroactively, and you don't have to retrofit. It applies to basically new construction or major upgrade projects. So the recommendation, Your Worship, is that Council would approve the plan outlined with respect to the corporate accessibility team and the AODA lead plan for the design of public spaces.
Okay, questions, discussion, motions? Councillor Dodd?
I'd like to move this recommendation that council approves the plan outlined with respect to the corporate accessibility team and the AODA lead plan and the design of the public spaces for the city.
Okay. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. 12A7, events facilitator provision of fireworks displays for Canada Day. Pam, are you going to do that one? Did I miss one? Oh, I missed a big one. Okay, sorry, if we can go back to 12A6, report manager of planning and heritage with regard to Heritage Grove Center, request for extension.
Your Worship, Council had approved a site plan agreement for 2 new buildings, including Princess Auto and a smaller building. The timeline for the completion of those works was June of 2015. Given the winter we had and a little later start than they'd hoped, they're requesting an extension from June of 2015 to November. This has been circulated to staff, and we're recommending that Council approve the request, and we would bring forward an amending site plan agreement with that timeline.
Thank you. Councillor Lemon?
I would move the recommendation. We all know the kind of winter we had, and no wonder they were held up, so let's encourage them and send the right message.
Good, thank you. Councillor Gregg, question?
Thank you, Mayor, but I do have a question. It's on a, within the planning consultation, a comment about the development to increase rear entry and alarm systems and various other features, comments from the police services. Is this already done, or are we forcing this now upon them?
That won't be anything.
So we can't remove.
We'll get Ms. Coulter to
The report
respond.
that is attached from November of 2014, report CS 14146, was the site plan approval of the original building. That's been approved. Those agreements are registered on title.
Okay,
Okay, so if I didn't like some of those comments, it's too late, it doesn't matter.
correct.
Thank you.
Okay, all in favor? That is carried. Now I'm all excited about fireworks for Canada Day, obviously. Looking ahead to warm weather in July. Who's presenting that report?
Thank you, Your Worship. We did issue an RFP for the provision of fireworks for Canada Day, which is really just around the corner. There were 8 plan takers, 3 submissions. The scoring for those submissions is provided in the report. The recommendation is that we go with Pyro World from Stainer. They have provided the fireworks over the last 3-year period, so they're also the highest scoring, but also the lowest price. So the same they would provide over the next 3 years at a cost of $99.74 plus HST.
So it's my understanding they gave them a price and said, what can you do for that price? It is how the bid worked? Okay. Councillor Kepke?
Thank you, Your Worship. I'd move the recommendation that we proceed with the RFP for Pyro World, Inc.
All in favor? It's carried. Great. 12A8, Development Coordinator, Heritage Planning with regard to Branningham Grove.
Thank you, Worship. In the report, it outlines the April 2nd resolution of Community Planning and Heritage Advisory Committee with respect to Branningham Grove, and they had recommended that council issue a notice of intention to designate. When council considered those minutes at your April 13 meeting, you tabled that recommendation. Just to recap, there was a demolition permit application received by the Building Division by Louis Gaveris on behalf of the mortgage holder, Halton Place Horse and Country. Taken at face value, the application was accepted as notice of intention to demolish. We did do some work to ensure Halton Place was eligible under the Act to submit a notice of intention to demolish, because the Ontario Heritage Act is very specific in terms of who has the right to do that. In fact, that company at this time is not the registered owner. They do have a judgment, but that hasn't been moved on. So based on a technicality, council does have more time to deal with this. So there are a number of options open to council. You could consider the recommendation from Community Planning and Heritage Advisory Committee, either approve it or not approve the recommendation. You had asked at the last meeting when you tabled the report on the understanding that there was to be a meeting held. And there was on April 6th a meeting held by the Mayor, Deputy Mayor Wright, and also Councillor Gregg with Mr. Lickabush and Mr. Binabozi, representing Mr. Lickabush and Mr. Gaveris. One of the options discussed was entering into some discussions with them to talk about elements of the building that could be preserved for future use. Some may be preserved for donation to other organizations. And we have just begun to have some discussions with Grey Roots around that possibility. So based on that information, the recommendation before you tonight is that you would direct staff to negotiate a site plan agreement with the mortgage holder in anticipation of them becoming the registered owner, that we would include in the agreement the initial documentation of the building, materials to be salvaged, how they're to be stored or delivered to interested parties in reusing and reusing certain materials, and a commitment to incorporating an interpretive plaque panel in the redevelopment of the site. That agreement would come forward to council for approval before it would then be registered on title.
Councillor Lemon?
Okay, my first question, have these people got any intention of developing that site, or is it just going to remain as it is? I mean, there's been no site plan submitted by them, has there?
Go ahead.
Through you, Your Worship, we understand that they've taken back the mortgage. They will become the registered owner. We also understand from them, based on the meeting we had with them, that the property will be listed for sale.
So they themselves are not going to develop it, they just want to demolish the building?
They have made an application to demolish the building, yes.
I'm having a problem with this. I mean, if there's something going to happen, what guarantee do we have that they will save the materials? We thought that was going to help them with another heritage property.
We would, through you, Your Worship, enter into an agreement that would be registered on title and would bind current and future owners to the... So in the demolition, the items would be identified for salvage, set aside and stored for reuse on the property in some type of feature. It's hard to know what that might be, given that we don't know at this time what the redevelopment might be. Some of the salvaged items may be donated to other groups, such as Grey Roots. We're just beginning to have those discussions. But that would come, the negotiations would happen, and then that would come back to council for approval through an agreement which would be registered on title.
Thank you. Councillor Thomas?
Through you, would it be fair to say that this is a way of reaching essentially the same place that we would arrive at if we designated without the necessity of a fight at the OMB and spending taxpayers' money. We're just going to arrive at the same place here, essentially.
Through your worship, a designated building can still be demolished, and so the decision by council to allow that, you're correct, could be appealed to the Ontario Municipal Board. So if the city were to allow demolition of a designated property, it can be done with conditions. In this case, we're suggesting that we do a site plan agreement under the Planning Act.
You done? Okay. Councillor Dodd?
Further to that, Ms. Coulter, if we say the city did go ahead with a designation on that property, what really does the city have control on keeping that historical, besides just the bylaw standards that are in place currently that we're already following? Is there if we designate this property, we have no control over some of the. We have no control of how it's actually going to be besides our bylaw standards, correct?
Property standards would continue to apply. Council also has the opportunity to make a decision with respect to the demolition. If someone was applying to demolish it and council said no, that decision can be appealed. If council can also, if it's designated, allow demolition with conditions, just kind of like what we've presented tonight.
Councillor McManaman?
Thank you, Worship. So on if we were to enter into a site plan agreement, and it's registered on title, fair enough, how does that, what guarantees are there in place that, well, with this or any site plan agreement, that someone does what they say they're going to do? And if they don't do what they, in another instance, somebody says they're going to put in curbs, and they don't, we, after the fact, make them put in a curb, as an example, or a sidewalk. In the case of a demolition, what sort of guarantees do we have that they are following through, would follow through on what they're saying they would do? Because after the fact, there wouldn't really be any way to go back on them unless, would there be penalties involved, I guess, or some sort of a holdback or something? That's my question.
Through your worship, normally the performance in a site plan agreement is guaranteed by a letter of credit. We didn't discuss a letter of credit as a way for the city to enforce the compliance with the agreement. Certainly, we can discuss that with the city solicitor and bring options around enforceability. It would be a legally binding agreement. It would be registered on title. Anyone buying it would be made aware that there is a requirement to use items that had been salvaged in the redevelopment. They would be required to bring forward the plans of what that looks like. I think your worry is between the demolition and the reconstruction, how can we be sure of that? So, you know, it's a good question, and I maybe would have to come back to council with more information.
That's fair enough. I just, my concern would be after the fact, if there aren't some penalties involved, the only fallback for the city would be to go to court, a lawsuit, and I'm not sure we want to, you know, I don't know, that'd be very messy. I think a letter of credit of some amount to guarantee they're going to do what they said they were going to do might be the appropriate way, but I'll look forward to legal advice on that.
Going to go to Mr. Ritchie next.
Thank you, Your Worship. Ms. Coulter did touch on it. The only way to really guarantee it, absolutely, is to get her letter of credit. That wasn't discussed. It can be. Short of that, the councillor is correct. The things they would do during the demolition, such as they take parts out and save them and donate them to the people that we've agreed to donate to, can be done. But if they don't store the materials as they've said they do, and we come back and it's gone, other than a letter of credit that we could cash, even that, you will not restore those materials. You'll have cash to perhaps do something else, but the materials will be gone. But that's an option council could look at least to ensure that they do store the materials, because it would cost them their letter of credit that we would have the right to cash.
Okay for now?
And last point, it'd be just interesting to know under the Ontario Heritage Act, demolition with conditions, as you talked about, could happen. What are how do they enforce that? How do they suggest that's enforced? I don't know. That'd be an interesting discussion with them.
Good, thank you. Councillor Gregg?
Well, I would like to state that I think within the last month, staff has worked very diligently with the property owners on this building, trying their best to satisfy those in our community and council that historical content and context of this building will be saved. I didn't place the building out where it is now. I don't pretend I have a mandate to tell people where they should or should not shop. If they choose to shop out on 16th Street, that's their decision. I think we have to be reasonable in what we look forward to down the road on 16th Street East. I know we will diligently look to fill all the vacant spaces on the east side, the downtown, and the west side of Owen Sound, so that we don't have a proliferation of just empty concrete buildings. But I think in speaking with the property owners, the value of the property has went down. As long as they've owned it, it's decreasing in value. This building, I think this is the best that staff is an excellent opportunity for staff to get the best partnership with the landowners. So I would move the recommendation at this point.
Great. Thank you, Deputy Mayor Wright.
Thank you very much. Councillor Gregg touched on a few things. Saving heritage buildings is getting more difficult all the time, and if you're reading the Toronto Star at all, you know that in Stouffville they're demolishing a very old grain storage elevator in Stouffville that they've been trying to save, but comes to the point where there just isn't the money to save that building, and as unfortunate as it is, this is a fact of life. We don't have the money to go in and save the building, and I don't really see anybody else rushing forward with money to purchase the building so that we can save it. So therefore, it's up to the owners what they want to do with the building. And I just say that the meeting we had with I believe it was one of the persons interested in the owner and the mortgage owner, they seem to be very conscious of the fact that Owen Sound is in a heritage place, and that they did mention that they drove up our main street and noticed that we are conscious of our heritage as they were as well. And I felt that they were very anxious to help us save parts of this building that wanted to be saved. And I did speak with Ms. Furness out at Grey Roots about going through the building. She is anxious to go through the building with some of the staff at Grey Roots to see what they're interested in having. And as I mentioned at that time, Moorestown is going to build a hotel, and it would be nice if they could, you know, if there was material to be saved that could be saved, they'd work around it to perhaps build the Branningham Hotel or Branningham House out at Grey Roots, or do something like that. You can't move the house. It would be absolutely impossible and very costly. But you can use some of the material from that house and store it. So we need to look on what we can do and try to do that. And I felt comfortable that they were anxious to help us do that. So I thought we'd worked out a pretty fair deal as per this report, and I certainly support that motion.
Great. If I can ask a few questions, Ms. Coulter, you've designated, the city has designated before, and it was St. Mary's High School.
In that process, Your Worship, we initiated the process to designate. The designation was appealed.
Okay, and then what was the agency that you dealt with?
Conservation Review Board.
And in that, it got into negotiations?
It did, and in the end, the agreement was essentially to allow the demolition with the construction of the portico using the building materials on the west end of the school.
So did that board, as you're negotiating with them, was their goal to save heritage features or to save the building? I don't know that I'm asking the right question, but what I'm, I guess, asking is, from your experience, would you say if we got into the same situation with this building, would we get into a position that we're encouraged to negotiate to save heritage features, or would we really get into negotiations of saving the building? How does that organization try and influence?
I think, Your Worship, it would be hard for me to answer that question. In that case, with St. Mary's, essentially, we worked towards a solution where we used a site plan agreement to enforce the demolition and then the reconstruction of that portico that represented the historic school. So without really reviewing the file and looking at the conservation review
Fair
board,
enough.
I am reluctant to answer.
Fair enough. So at this moment, we don't have a application in front of us, so we don't necessarily have to make a decision tonight. A new application would have to be filed. It would be 60 days from the time of filing that we either negotiate out things or we don't.
You're correct, Your Worship. There will need to be a proper notice from the registered owner. From that point, you would have 60 days. Our goal would be that we would commence these negotiations so we don't
Immediately.
leave ourselves short on time.
Okay, good, thank you. Councillor O'Leary?
Okay, so I'm confused now. Like, I thought the time was ticking already on this demolition, so,
But because their application wasn't filed by the right party,
right?
then there really isn't an application in front of us.
Okay.
So we're not ticking right now. Okay, so we've got Councillor Gregg's motion to proceed with the recommendation. Councillor Lemon?
Your Worship, on the basis that we do not have a valid application, I would make a motion to table until such time that a valid application for demolition comes forward. It's premature at this point.
So to Councillor Lemon's motion, Councillor Gregg's hand went up first, and I think Councillor Thomas is next.
I think we would get to that same verdict later on around this table when we examine or we bring back the planning committee meetings from a month ago. So I think working with the motion that's on the floor right now is fair, just, and reasonable, and not worth putting off to a later date.
If I can go to Councillor Thomas.
I won't be supporting the motion to table. I think that this is an issue that has come up and come up and come up and come up and been delayed and delayed and delayed. And I think that, true, there is now nothing in front of us that's going to force our hand, but I think that the process that we've gone through and what we've arrived at here is a friendly way to arrive where we will likely arrive, whatever process we choose. And I think that having the opportunity to have conversations with the property owner without a gun being held or a time bomb ticking or whatever cute analogy you want to use, I think that, you know, we just need to move ahead with this and we need to settle this issue.
Mr. Ritchie?
If I could, Your Worship, referring back to when the Prince of Wales was giving us the designation several years ago, he clearly said, and certainly a man that is very much more into heritage than I am, these buildings need to have an adaptive reuse. We clearly heard from the owners, or the people who control the property at this time, their business model did not include an adaptive reuse of this building. The council who was at that meeting, along with staff, I think negotiated something here was acceptable to both parties. There's no doubt in my mind leaving that meeting that the people who are currently in control of that property do not see a better agreement than what we reached. However, we would certainly be prepared at council's wish to go back and try to renegotiate, but they do not see in their business model an adaptive reuse of that building on that site.
Great, thank you. Councillor O'Leary?
Is there not a motion on the table? Are we not dealing with Councillor Gregg's?
Before we deal with that, there's a motion that came to table that motion, so we're dealing with the tabling motion. We'll vote on it, depending on how whether we table or we don't table, then we'll go back to
Okay.
Councillor Gregg's.
Thank you.
Councillor Kefke.
Your worship, I don't believe debate is allowed on a tabling motion other than to time.
Okay.
So I would ask that we call the question on the table.
Good point. It's being polite. All in favor of tabling?
No.
Councillor Lemon only. All opposed? It is defeated. Thanks. Back to Councillor Gregg's motion. Councillor McManaman.
Thank you. If, and I just point out, I think it's clear, but I think, you know, you should say these things. If the negotiations don't go the way that council wishes, this item can be brought back at any time.
Yep.
So that's just that point. Thank you.
Okay, so to Councillor Gregg's motion, I call the question. All in favor?
Point of clarification. At this point in time, who is the registered owner of said property?
Through you, your worship, on page 2, the registered owner is 1754537 Ontario Limited. That property, or that numbered company, is the registered owner listed at the registry office.
Yeah, but is that this
Councillor Lemon.
Alton Place Horse and Country?
Councillor Lemon, it appears that there is an owner who has defaulted on a mortgage. Halton appears to be the mortgage holder. They are taking back, and they're either selling by power of sale, which it does not appear that they're doing under the terms of the mortgage, or else they're getting a court order to foreclose and take title back. So there's been a default. We know that from what we're told, and they're in the process of taking back possession. So to the, let's just call the question. To the motion, all in favor? It is carried. If we can flip over to 12C2, which is item 7.1A from the minutes of the Community Planning Heritage Committee meeting held April 2nd, 2015. That's the section that we pulled out at our last meeting and tabled to this meeting. That was a recommendation from the committee to designate the property. I believe we need a motion to either accept that recommendation or not accept that recommendation. So, Councillor Dodd?
We could just be able to receive this motion, or that work, right?
And that would do it without accepting the recommendation, correct?
Okay, so I'd move the motion that we receive the remainder of the cultural heritage and planning minutes.
Great, all in favor? That is carried, thank you. Back to 12A9. Mr. Becking with regard to expropriation of the Nadell Incorporated property.
Thank you, Your Worship. Council will recall in December, staff brought forward a recommendation to proceed with acquisition of property under the Expropriation Act. The situation was created as a result of the reconstruction of 10th Street and 9th Avenue intersection, wherein we inadvertently constructed public works on private land. We have, on the basis of council's approval, gone forward under the Expropriations Act. We did attempt to negotiate a settlement with the property owner. Unfortunately, that was unsuccessful. We then proceeded to a hearing for necessity, which requires that the municipality, in our case, demonstrate the need for the acquisition. The property owner, on the day, late on the day before the hearing was to be held, waived their rights. So for all practical purposes, the expropriation is now complete, save and except for the registration of certain documents and a hearing for compensation, which we're going to be proceeding. So their staff recommendation is that the mayor and clerk be authorized to execute such documents as are necessary to complete the process and to proceed to the hearing for compensation.
Great, thank you. Discussion, questions, motion. Councillor Kepke.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll move the recommendation contained in the report.
And all in favor of the motion? Carried, thank you. 12A10, I understand that's the one that is being withdrawn from consideration, and you're,
That's correct, Your Worship. I understand that there's been correspondence received late this afternoon, which is pertinent to the item before you. My recommendation would be to refer the matter back to Operations Committee for further consideration, and another report be brought forward at that time.
Councillor O'Leary?
Yep, motion to table.
Great, thank you. All in favor? Carried, thank you. Report from the Chief of Police with regard to Central Emergency Reporting Bureau. Does someone want to present it? We didn't really give that to anybody to present tonight, did we? Mr. Ritchie, you've got...
I can certainly attempt it, Your Worship. The police chief has brought this over. It's part of their 911 agreement, I believe, with Central Emergency Reporting Bureau. My understanding is it's very much just something required in order to complete their contract.
Great. Councillor Lemon?
Yes, Your Worship, I would move the recommendation. The dispatch there is covering a large area, and I think this is just part of the administration.
Great. Any other comments? All in favor of that motion? That is carried. We're down to the consent agenda.
Yes, through Your Worship, there's several items on the consent agenda this evening. First, there's a report from the Manager of Economic Development and Tourism respecting the 2015 Art Crawl. There's 4 reports from the Facilities Booking Coordinator respecting the Dog Show, the Canadian Mental Health Association's Ride Don't Hide bike ride, the 2015 Emancipation Festival, and an operating agreement with the Owen Sound Senior Lacrosse Club. There's a planning report and planning notices that have no comment, minutes for receipt from the DIA, Owen Sound Municipal Nonprofit Housing Corporation, Owen Sound Housing Company, and Grace Solville Conservation Authority. And lastly, there's correspondence received, which is presented for the information of council.
Great. Thank you. Councillor Kepke?
Thank you, Your Worship. I would move approval of the items on the consent agenda, as well as indicating that in the Grace Solville Conservation Authority, there were no significant items that related to Owen Sound.
Okay, so I'm going to call the vote on that, and then I'm going to go back to some of those and get some presentations made. All in favor? The consent agenda carried. Thank you. If I can go back to 12B8, Downtown Improvement Area Board. Councillor O'Leary, anything you want to add in the minutes?
I do, thank you, Your Worship. We had a deputation for the city manager on the city's 5-year strategic plan, and the DIA made 6 recommendations. That the River Precinct project be a priority, the city promote more activity in the harbor area, that street and sidewalk rebuilds be done to the specifications of the downtown master plan, that the city look at replacing streetlights on 8th and 9th Street, that the city update signage in the core, such as directional signage for long-term parking, and that the city recognize the downtown as the heart of the city. And I just wanted to mention that we had our DIA annual celebration last Thursday night, and I want to thank Mayor Body and Acting City Manager Mr. Ritchie and the 5 councillors that came. Thanks very much for all your support. Good time had by all.
Great.
And with that, I'll move the minutes.
Well, they're already moved.
Oh, right, we did.
Moved in bulk, so we're just getting a report. Councillor McManaman.
Thank you. To Councillor Leary, just a quick question. It talks about a partnership with the Georgian Bay Symphony, perhaps in the office space. Is that moving forward, or is that still on the table? Or
That's still being discussed with Chair Parson.
Good. Thank you. Minutes of boards, the Owen Sound Municipal Nonprofit Housing Meeting held on March 17th, 2015.
Okay, it was a rather interesting meeting. Out of the 240 dwelling units that are under the administration of the Owen Sound Housing Company and Owen Sound Municipal, they had 1 frozen pipe only, and that was in a group of buildings where they had a frozen pipe last year on another unit, which didn't freeze this year, but now another one froze, and as of the meeting date, that pipe was still frozen, so the frost had to have been down very, very deep in that area. The budget is being achieved. The financials for the housing are in good shape, And they're currently undergoing some restorative work on Ordnance Park with some balconies, et cetera, which they've been working on for a number of years. So everything's moving ahead, and they are looking at the Frank Smith's buildings with an eye to upgrading and what they would have to do to rebuild, because the buildings are getting fairly old and cannot be made accessible. It's just physically impossible with the design of the buildings.
Great. Any other questions for Councillor Lemon? Councillor McManaman?
Thank you, Your Worship. And Councillor Lemon and I sit on these committees, and it just occurred to me, Councillor Lemon, as you were going through that, we should, this is probably one of the best kept secrets we've got. In my time on council, we've never had a presentation, I don't believe, from this group as to who they are, what they do, what they're involved with. And I know council has an idea on that, but even for the general public, because this group does a lot of good work behind the scenes that no one, really is even aware of. So, and I'm just wondering, so if it would be appropriate, I'd make a motion that council invite the housing company and the housing board chair or their members to come and make a presentation to council just on who they are and what they do.
It's a good idea, actually. I was reading Owen Sound Municipal Nonprofit Housing Corporation and Owen Sound Housing Company Limited. I was just about to ask what the difference was, but you kind of hit it. Councillor Lemon.
Well, I think that's an excellent idea. The last time there was a presentation on housing from the Owen Sound Housing Company would have been 1986 or 87. So it was a few years ago.
There seems to be an indication, there's no use arguing over it, but I assume there's been one from the looks.
There was one since I've been on council, they've come, but it was a while ago.
Yeah, wasn't within, wasn't during last.
Was to exclude them from development charges.
So we'll call the question to that invitation. All in favor? Yeah, that's carried. Great, thanks. Grace Sabo, we're skipping, so we're down to 12C, which is minutes of accessibility advisory committee. Councillor O'Leary, you're presenting.
Thank you, Your Worship. We had some discussions on some complaints through the specialized transit system, as well as modifications for the large wheelchairs. And Mr. Becking was good enough to sit in on the meeting, and he is looking into those issues. City manager was in attendance and gave committee members the opportunity to have some input on the 5-year strategic plan. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Moving those minutes.
And with that, I'll move the minutes.
Great, thanks. And all in favor? Carried. Next, 12C2, we're jumping over because we've already covered it. 12C3 is minutes of Cultural Advisory Committee. Councillor Kepke.
I believe Councillor Thomas is the chair of that committee.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay. You could give the report if you like,
No,
Marion.
great.
Thanks, Your Worship. We accepted a report. I better put my glasses back on before I start talking. We did accept a report at the most recent meeting. We had a wonderful presentation from May Ip on behalf of the local Chinese community, and she informed us of some of the things that they're busy doing, and it goes well beyond the Chinese New Year celebrations that probably most people know about. They've been meeting quite regularly. They're looking at bringing exchange students from China to Owen Sound. They are quite an active group of people. They're quite interested in the possibility of the city twinning with an area in China and would like to be a resource for us in that process. They also believe that they'd like to be involved in helping us develop more tourism from Chinese residents of larger cities in southern Ontario to this region so they can see what we really have to offer here. So it was a really positive and very interesting talk. We also had a deputation from Heather Hughes, the curator of contemporary exhibitions at the Tom, regarding the Canadian Spirit 2015 With a Destiny off-site public art projects. And this year there will be public art projects in Local Heroes Square at the southwest corner of City Hall here, in Queen's Park and Jervis Bay Park, Harrison Park, in the Harbour area, on the wall of the Kelso Beach Park washroom, which desperately needs some upgrading, and the storage building at the mill dam, which presently has some art on it, but not of the kind that we would normally encourage in Owen Sound. So it'll be replaced with something that's a little better planned. And that is my report for today, and I would move approval of those minutes.
And questions? No. Approving the, all in favor of the motion? Carried. Thank you. Economic Development Advisory Committee, Councillor Thomas again.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. We did have a deputation from the Financial Services Department at our most recent meeting regarding tax policy, and without going too far into it and getting myself into the swampland, I'll just say that everything's on track. It was really presented for information. There were no decisions made on that. We did talk a little bit about some of the particular themes and areas that we want to look at as a committee during the next number of years, and I'll just quickly give you the list of things that the Economic Development Committee is investigating. What we've done is broken the committee into smaller working groups who will each look at one of these areas, and if I run through the list, we've got a group that'll be looking at potential school closures coming down the road in Owen Sound, at the need for improvement of the downtown storefronts, specifically in stores that are vacant presently. And one of the initiatives that actually came forward from the Economic Development Committee was the idea of creating our own storefront window paper that promotes downtown and shopping and all of the great things in Owen Sound, just to dress up some of the storefronts that are presently vacant that look a little bit, well, tatty, shall we say. We have a committee that's going to be working on waterfront redevelopment, on expansion at Georgian College. We have somebody who's very interested in advancing the idea of an angel investment fund in Owen Sound for small business people and entrepreneurs with really good ideas but very little funding. We want to look at the healthcare area as an expansion area in Owen Sound. We have ongoing retention visits by yourself, Your Worship, and our Manager of Economic Development. We are working on a youth entrepreneur network to support and promote youth business in Owen Sound in a more meaningful way. We're looking at the possibility of a Dragon's Den type concept for Owen Sound to again use as a business incubator for small business or people with great ideas but without a real idea of how to turn them into a reality. We've got a committee looking into the idea of energy to waste, which is once again coming to the forefront on the world stage, certainly, as municipalities around the world try to find ways to deal with the extreme cost of landfill and dealing with their garbage. So we're going to look into that. We're going to look at development processes in Owen Sound and have a presentation to see, whether there's anything we can do to streamline the development process. We're going to look at how to promote more residential development, how to attract some of those nice high-tech businesses in Waterloo that might want to live in a slightly nicer place, and to promote arts and culture. There's a strong support within the community for looking at ways to turn Owen Sound into the art town destination for Southern Ontario. So again, not all of these will be initiatives that'll come forward in any hurry to council, but they're all things that the committee identified as areas that we could start looking at, and probably in fairly short order, one or two of those ideas will drift to the top and will really get more of a focus from the committee and then ultimately come forward to council for consideration.
Good.
I think I've probably said enough. I move those minutes. Thank you.
Councillor McManaman.
Thank you, Worship, and I appreciate the councillor going through that list. I'm a little concerned when I look at that list that some items on there, most of those items I would agree are certainly under the purview of the Economic Development Committee. I'm concerned that some of them are not. And for instance, the development process review, now that is all city-involved people, so I'm not quite as concerned there, but I would think that the Planning Committee would want input. In fact, I would think they would be the lead on a development process review. not to get into a who's on first discussion, but I just think some more thought needs to go into how that may proceed. Because certainly, I mean, we have a planning committee, that's, I would think that would be under their purview, with input from economic development, as an example. Particularly concerned with the energy to waste discussion with 2 public members and no city representative there. The operations committee just had a discussion about energy from waste last meeting, and did not support staff investigating. The last meeting we just discussed was all of our waste contracts are coming due, the recycling, waste transfer station, and the waste collection. There was a discussion, should we be putting out, when we put out RFPs for those 3, should we be discussing energy from waste? I think it was clearly felt by the committee that that was something well beyond our pay grade to discuss that. So again, I guess my main point on this would be I'm not sure that's the purview of the Economic Development Committee. That would be my comment. So some of these obviously are very appropriate, but at least those 2 struck me as perhaps were not. So I don't know how we move forward approving these minutes, saying it's okay to, after these minutes are approved, I would think people would be authorized to, by council to, I'm just not sure where we go from here. So I'm looking for some direction, I guess.
I think about 3 people want to answer. We'll start with Mr. Ritchie.
If I could, Your Worship, Tuesday mornings following a council meeting, the senior management team meet to discuss exactly what's been debated by council this evening. Our senior management team, Steve will certainly be there in the morning, Mr. Furness. We will discuss exactly how moving these forward with the knowledge of the various committees that may have already looked at these or may be looking at these. And as Councillor Thomas said, not all of these initiatives may come through economic development. We will coordinate so that staff time as well as the individual's time and council's time is devoted clearly to maximize all of our time. So we will discuss that tomorrow and continuing on to make sure that these progress forward in the best manner.
Councillor Thomas?
Yeah, and that was a great answer. Thanks, Wayne. I think the approach we're trying to take at economic development presently is that no idea is too outlandish. Do you know what? We have got to make things happen in Owen Sound. I am devoted to making things happen in Owen Sound, and I think that, this list just reflects a free-flowing discussion at the economic development table, and certainly we will not be acting in isolation of any work that's been done by other committees or any discussions that have come from other committees, but it just really reflects the interests and, as I said, the freewheeling discussion that went on to just sort of spitball what kind of possibilities we could look at as a group. So again, it'll be the small groups of 2 or 3 people. They'll report back to the larger group, and then something may or may not happen. So.
Go ahead.
So those are good answers, and I certainly support the initiative or the ideas flowing, the free-flowing ideas. But I do think we need to be cognizant of the fact that other committees are also doing things, and they need to be, what they're doing needs to be incorporated and respected throughout this. So, but Mr. Ritchie's answer, I'm fine with that. That's good.
Well, and from my point of view, so many committees overlap, and we do overlap from time to time, and make sure that we don't duplicate things. Economic development is so important to try and grow our city and try and look at absolutely everything we can that are barriers to growth or things that we can use to make growth better. And any idea that we could potentially develop an industry around is what we're looking at. We're not spending any staff time on looking at garbage recycling gasification. However, we've got people that are keen that want to go out and collect information and bring it back to us so we understand it better, and then we can decide if we want to look at it in more depth. But boy, the more information we can get to people that are keen to bring into us, I think the better. So, thanks. I need to call the question, don't I, on that one? So all in favor of receipt of those minutes, or approval of those minutes? Thank you. Carried. Financial advisory, that's me. Thank you, Councillor Thomas. I was really hoping when we were talking about the financial stuff coming to economic development that you'd cover it for me, because it's, everybody get your pillows out, we're going to talk about money. At our Financial Advisory Committee meeting that happened March 31st, 2015, there was three major areas that we discussed. We discussed the methodology, invoicing methodology for water and wastewater, reviewed some of the background regarding, I'm going to skip that word, water and wastewater invoicing. Much of the cost for providing water and wastewater services is obviously fixed in nature, so it's the infrastructure of pipes in the ground, water and wastewater processing plants and pumping stations. The use of a service charge attempts to spread some of the portion of the fixed cost to all users. The consumption charge is attached to the amount of water that we consume. Once the fixed costs are recovered, there is an incremental cost associated with each cubic liter of water that is produced and consumed by the customer, by our taxpayers or homeowners. In the past, service charges were higher than the consumption charges, and the incremental costs were a small cost for the utility operation. The service charge is a smaller portion and the consumer charges are larger portions. This has been in response to customers who felt too high service charges did not promote water conservation, and the wish to see reduction in water use offset by a reduction in their water bill. So right now, obviously, that being said, the actual cost of water will be less than what we're billing, because we're still billing a certain amount of the infrastructure on the cost of water, as well as the service or the fixed cost that goes out with the bill. Wastewater rate is 100% of the customer's total water charge, so water out, water back, which that water charge includes the water consumption and the service charge. The other thing that we discussed, or the next thing, was the tax ratios and the rate scenarios. The tax ratios govern the tax rate for each property class in relation to the class tax rate for residential tax class. So we've got residential, we've got commercial, we've got industrial. We'll have agriculture, we'll have pipelines. Am I missing any? Multi-residential properties. So changing the ratios can influence how much tax burden is shouldered by each tax class. So over the past number of years, as we've learned that our commercial and industrial charges were too high, we purposely reduced those, which of course affected the residential rate. When the city joined the county, now getting to be 12 years ago, the province required the city to bring our tax ratios in line with the county, and we have been doing that over the past 12 years. There are three different options that were presented to us at the Finance Committee meeting. One option is to do nothing, so not change it at all. This would result in a 2.15% increase in 2015 to the residential rate. So that's not varying the level carried by industrial, commercial, and multi-use residential. At the other end of the scale, we could continue to follow the steps that we started in 2012 to align with the county over a 10-year period. So this would be pretty accelerated. Residential tax class would increase in 2015 by 3.87% if we pick that option. And again, it made sense a couple of years ago to try and accelerate it to get our commercial rate down so that we were competitive with other municipalities, that we're trying to outbid to attract commercial businesses, industry, et cetera, and jobs. The committee in the end recommended in the minutes that we would go with a more modest or middle reduction of commercial taxes that would limit the tax burden to the residential tax class to 3% in 2015. The commercial increase would be 1.73%. It sets a plan to align with the county by 2021. And finally, we looked at the initial, not the finalized, I don't think. We still have to be audited, but the initial division by division spending for the budget amounts, the actual figures for 2013, and compared them to 2014 and the difference in those amounts. We went through department by department and looked at each department at the meeting, and that's in the report, to see how each department did, and with an explanation. In summary, the total budgeted expenditures are approximately $50,000 over annually. Mr. Ritchie, I'm going to ask you for help in that in a minute. Now that I read my note, that does make sense. It appears the city will have a surplus in 2014 between approximately $200,000 and $300,000. So in a almost $26 million budget, that ends up being approximately 1.1 and a bit percent the overall budget. So it's not much. That council, or the committee is recommending that council apply that surplus into the unallocated reserve. The unallocated reserve at present sits at a balance of approximately $600,000. So if anyone has any questions, Mr. Ritchie will be happy to answer them. Councilor McManaman, you're rubbing your forehead.
Yeah, no,
Is that
I had a few questions, if I might. And just to that point that you raised for Mr. Ritchie, the minutes speak to a $50,000 over budget, but we have a surplus of $200,000. And I'm not quite grasping how that. Bottom of page 6 of 7 of the minutes. Bottom of page 6.
Page 6.
The total budget expenditures are $50,000 over annually.
I'm not seeing that, but sorry. Budgeted total expenditure of city are $50 million. Is that what you're reading?
No, in summary, the total budget expenditures are, well, that's 50. Plus 50.
Over annual.
Okay, so yeah, what does that, I'm sorry, maybe there's no dollar amount there, so maybe I'm completely wrong.
If I could, Your Worship, I'm not seeing that particular.
At the bottom, in summary, the total budgeted expenditures are plus.
Of the minutes, page 6.
50,000.
We've got it on the big screen, Mr. Ritchie.
In summary, the total budget expenditures.
That's an interesting issue. All I can tell you, Worship, and I'll ignore that particular line.
Just go to the next one.
I'm referring more to the summary, the very final summary. We've actually had some invoices come in since that time. That's late invoices, but I feel confident our surplus overall, both capital and operating, will be in the neighborhood of $250,000 this year. We had some significant overages, and they are on the sheet. We had some significant underspending. It related mostly to our WSIB experience. Interesting discussion earlier tonight. Our WSIB experience was very good for 2014. We had some staffing issues where we were understaffed throughout the year. That obviously led to a savings. But at this time, it would appear we are virtually done with our year-end work, and we will be about $250,000 surplus. We recommend it goes into the unallocated surplus. Certainly, experience shows us that where we have these significant surpluses, it is possible, and 2015 may be one, depending on the weather conditions we are seeing, where we have a deficit, and we would like to have that for council to draw on.
Just further to that's including the winter control being over budget by approximately $600,000, 1.8 million as opposed to 1.2.
That's correct.
That's good. The other item, I think, when we talk about budget ratios and we, quickly, people's eyes glaze over, but I think it is important to note, and it's in the economic development minutes, actually right before that, that talks about tax ratios. Owen Sound, the taxes we charge residential, commercial, industrial have been traditionally quite out of whack. And that happened over many, many, many years of charging higher commercial and industrial taxes. since 2006, we've reduced that commercial ratio by 19%. What they were paying before, and in relation to residential, and what they're paying now is come down 19%. Industrial's down 14.5%. Large industrial's down 24%. So over many years, again, the problem was created over a long period of time. It takes time to fix it or get it back into, but certainly on the commercial, industrial, and large industrial, the city's done a lot of work on getting those taxes lower. And it's just something that, you shouldn't gloss over that, because it's a lot of effort and a lot of work's gone into that. The other thing I'd just quickly mention is, we do, I don't know if others do, about the water charges and how much is the fixed amount and how much is the variable. And you hear from people that, they hardly use any water, and they're concerned about their water bill. And I shouldn't let that pass either. Out of the 94 municipalities that took part in the survey, 94 of them, 82% of those municipalities do it the same way as us. And now, there are different ratios there, but they all have a fixed rate and a consumption rate. So I just think that that seems to be the way that people deal with the water bills moving forward. I think that is all. Yes, that's all I had, Your Worship. Thank you.
Best practices. Councillor Thomas.
Just a short correction to the minutes, Your Worship. The sentence should read, plus 50 million annually. The word over needs to come out of there in those minutes. It was just a typo.
Total budget expenditures
Are over 50 million annually.
Okay. Thank you for the interpretation.
That makes sense.
Good to Councillor Lemon. Thanks.
You get the editor's award. One of the things that should be noted, that when we started the exercise a decade ago to change the ratios, we were way outside the range of fairness. And now I believe commercial is within the range of fairness, the provincial standard. Industrial is as well, is it not?
Through Your Worship, we're still just slightly above the ranges of fairness for industrial, but our other business classes are all well within the ranges of fairness. However, we are committed to blending our rates with those of the county. So that's the impetus to keep going. Compared to other municipalities of our size and our structure, our rates, our ratios are very competitive.
And the other point I would make on the question of, and this goes back to a past life of the acting city manager with the PUC, the question comes up of how much is allocated on a fixed basis and how much is allocated on a variable basis. While many municipalities do charge the fixed and variable, the ratio is what is important. And at one time, we kept expanding the fixed portion, and that was hurting the people who were practicing conservation. And so I think we're heading in the right direction by adjusting to putting a little more on the usage side. The other question I've got for you, why are multiple family at a higher rate than single residential? What's the justification for that? Or is there one?
Through you, Your Worship, there certainly is, although it's always debatable. It's as we move forward, and we would have liked to have specifically targeted that class this year to reduce those. We just couldn't. You can't do everything for everyone. But moving ahead, one of our initiatives will be to reduce the multi-residential tax ratio as well. I believe our rate there is, again, looking at our comparators, is probably getting out of whack. However, to do that, that has to move somewhere, and this year we just felt we couldn't do any movement on it. But absolutely moving ahead, that will be probably our next targeted area.
So it is on the radar.
Yes.
Thank you.
Good, thanks. So, Councillor Thomas, since you found that $50 million explanation, I just correct, at $250,000 of surplus, that's really only half a percent of. I was thinking about the tax portion of it at 26. So, having presented that, nobody asked me any questions. I'll move approval of the minutes of the Finance Committee. Oh.
You can't
Oh,
do
I
that as the
can.
mayor.
Yeah, you're right.
Forgot where you were. I'll move that we approve the minutes of the Financial Advisory Committee meeting.
Good. Rules, rules, rules. Need a lawyer here. Thank you. All in favor? Carried. Thanks. Fire Services, I saw Brian and Arlene both put their hands up.
I'll go first.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Sure.
Thank you, Worship. We had a report from the city manager on the structure fires at 2nd Avenue East, and the report covered in detail the initial call times, fire dispatch, and response and arrival times as related to the fire. And I believe our chair, Deputy Mayor Wright, is going to add to that. Thank you.
I'm not going to add to that particular, but I'm going to do the minutes.
Your button there. Go ahead.
Yes, so, the fire, we had a very good fire, oh, sorry. We had an excellent fire committee meeting, and unfortunately, I was a little bit late, so they made me chair. And
I'll teach you to be late.
so I am reporting. We had a report from our human resources manager on the Owen Sound Fire recruitment and selection practices, and as you have read there, that there will be a further report coming on further information that was required. We had a report from our acting fire chief, dual response protocol, and he gave his detailing the fire department current dual response protocols, and he explained that the dual response protocol, which is asking assistance from the surrounding fire departments, is at the call of the discretion of the fire officer in charge of a fire, and they're invited to, or they're asked to come in to assist in a major fire. We had a report from the deputy fire chief, Mr. Montino, on bunker clothing and cleaning, and we got a really good explanation of the need to carry the extra suits for the clothing as the clothing does get contaminated, and he explained the clothing to us, and as a result of that, we have requested that we invite council down to have a tour of the fire department and also to view the bunker clothing and other pieces of equipment down there so that we understand what they're talking about. And I know when we talked about the budget, we talked about the bunker suits and why was it necessary to have so many outfits for firemen, but then we found out that the clothing is from T-shirt out and it does get contaminated, and we don't want contamination to go from the fire station to the home, and so we certainly need to take a look at that. We also had a verbal report, read the status of the Emergency Operations Center at the Police Services Building, where it's going to go, and that the equipment is all sitting there. It was purchased under a JEP grant a while ago, but unfortunately it hasn't been installed yet, and that we'll get a further report from them on that. We had a verbal report, read the Home Visitation and Assistance Program. That is ongoing and will start up again this spring and go through the summer months. It is a valuable assistance to homeowners or to residents of homes. And they do this as a courtesy. It's not anything that any resident has to feel threatened about. They go in and they if you allow them to come in, which we certainly hope that residents do, they just check your home for fire hazards and check your smoke alarms and that, and it's a courtesy. They're not going in to report you or anything like that. So hopefully that will be accepted by the community, as it always has been. We had a report on the installation of the City of Owen Sound Emergency Response Plan for mobile devices, and we had an action plan. We had a report from the acting fire chief on emergency plan training for council, and that will be coming up, and we're all expected to take the emergency training, and you'll get further information on that. So I will move receipt of this set of minutes.
Great. Questions? Seeing none, all in favor? Carried. Thank you. Minutes of Operation Advisory, Councilor McManaman.
Thank you, Worship. Again, another long operations meeting. Those are the norm. I'll just hit some of the highlights. We received notice from Bell Canada that they will wish to remove the pay phones at the Bayshore Community Center and the transit terminal. The minutes, and I would ask that they be corrected as they move forward, talks about that staff, direct staff to have them removed, and just to clarify, we received notice from Bell that they're going to remove them, so it's not a city initiative, it's their initiative. They didn't feel they were generating enough profit to keep them. There was a discussion of the committee, if the city wanted to keep them, it would be about $1,200 a year per phone. The committee decided to not endorse that, and so I'm assuming those phones would be removed in the future. It looks. Go ahead.
And is it because they're not being used that they're maintenance? What is it?
No, use.
Use.
And I forget the numbers, and I don't know if the director remembers them right off the top of his head, but one of the phones was once every other day, and one was, it's very...
Once or twice a week. The revenue stream is not sufficient for Bell Canada to justify the maintenance costs associated with keeping the phone there, Your Worship. And but if the city were of a mind to want the phones to stay, then there would be a monthly charge of $50 per month per phone left in place.
I don't think it's necessary. I think everybody carries a cell phone. If they don't, the person standing next to them does if there's an emergency.
Right, and that was the recommendation of the committee to not move forward with that. So you'll remember from this past winter, we used a clear lane salt. It was a green color. Used it as a test case on different roads and came back, the tests were quite successful. Mr. Follis, road superintendent, had some interesting pictures from different roads, road that had it and the road that used conventional salt. And it applies faster, it works at lower temperatures, it lasts longer, so you don't have to reapply it as often. Then you're doing fewer return trips, so and the impact on the environment of vehicles isn't as great. So Mr. Follis is going to, or staff, if this is approved, we're going to look at, it was a small test case, we're looking at about 50% of our salt use next year would be this clear lane green salt, and basically expand the test case and see how it goes. But by all indications, it's this salt does cost more money, but you're using far less, so it appears to be a success. We also discussed at great length the Grey County Transportation Master Plan. The city's been asked to formally comment on that. Our formal comments are attached here in the minutes. Just to hit the highlights, we asked them to look at integration with our transit system, including intercity transit with the development of the transit plan that they're looking at. We talked about before the city's willing to assume, the city's opposed to assuming any roads within the city, as well as bridges and culverts, those type of things, before we're aware of what the full operating and capital costs are, the benefits of the transfer, service levels, and anyway, a lot more information before we'd even consider having that discussion, I think. We also talked about moving forward on one of the recommendations was the transfer of 28th Avenue East and the 10th concession jointly owned by the city and Meaford to the county. We'd like to see those discussions move forward quick or as fast as possible. So that deals with the Transportation Master Plan. Just a couple of other items. The issue of the backflow prevention that this council's discussed a number of times. We have set up the program. All the nuts and bolts of it are listed here. I would point out one issue that council may hear about is the subsidy for installing backflow prevention to avoid flooding is set at $3,000 per house, which is, anyway, we may hear back about that. That is the standard, though, across the province. We looked at many municipalities, and that appears to be the number that they give a subsidy for. So other than that, we talked about the committee's going to look at parking around the Bayshore Community Center during large events. The issue of you'll see boulevard parking on 3rd Avenue East in the particular 1700 block. That's going to be dealt with, but the committee wished to investigate a little further just the manner in which people are parking at large events around the Bayshore and how that might be cleaned up somewhat, because some nights it can be a real free-for-all depending on the event. So the committee thought we should look at that. With that, Your Worship, those are all the comments I have. I would move adoption of these minutes.
Questions? Councillor Levin?
Oh, the one thing that very much concerns me was our discussion with the county over possibly downloading certain roads to the city. And I think that's something we've got to keep a very tight watch on and make sure we're being dealt with in equity. My concern is that those roads are highly used. Grey County Road 1 is a case in point, it's the one I know the best. There's a huge amount of traffic comes into the city on it, as there does with the Leith Road, the East Bay Shore. So I think we've got to be very, very careful that the county, that we're treated in equity on this, because when I look at the traffic counts that I know exist in the city, I'm quite sure some of the rural county roads, the traffic count would be a fraction of what is on those roads. And it should be based on usage as well. And I think that I have problem justifying where some of these county roads are and the amount of traffic they actually get.
Okay, thank you. Other questions? Call the question. Approval of those minutes. All in favor? Great, thank you. Recreation and Parks Advisory Committee, Councillor Dodd presenting.
I guess that old saying is true, you save the best for last, so.
I don't think that was the same.
Well, okay, we'll move forward here. So we had the Parks and Recreation Committee, Advisory Committee on Thursday, April 9th. It was a pretty short committee meeting. We did receive correspondence from the Grey Bruce Health Unit regarding an environmental scan of healthy food choices and tap water. Just quickly go over their action items. They had 5 action items. Considering Bruce Grey Food Charter when developing programs/policies, survey patrons to ensure serving what they want, create a policy with guidelines for healthy food choices available at concessions and vending machines, develop a business plan, and improve, promote, and maintain tap water access. So we actually in the committee discussed this in great lengths. Currently, we're discussing about some of the things that we currently have. We already have an agreement in place until 2018 with a private company. So we discussed the use of bottled water and having access to sanitary tap water found at city facilities. We also suggested that when the current beverage and snack agreement expires, that instead of the city automatically renewing, that we look at some other alternatives. We also discussed the need for a balance as well as offering a choice for patrons. From that, we also discussed a report that was brought to us regarding the design of the stormwater management pond at the Julie MacArthur Regional Recreational Center. So this would be to the south side of where the old Victoria track would be. So it is defined as a dry pond. Normally it's intended to empty in approximately an hour from depending on the intensity of a rainfall. So it's just a collection that kind of drains off to later on it goes into the piping. The committee viewed photos of this current site and noted that the pond is intended to be dry and that the outlet was a little bit higher than the base, so there was a little bit of some work that needed to be done there by Parks. There is something that we were recommending here to City Council was that signage and work with the Parks and Open Space Division, that it was actually went forward and that was required with the appropriate documentation. One of the things on there was about signage noting that there was going to be during heavy rainfall that there could be a pooling of water. So that was something that we wanted to make sure that happened, just for both insurance liability reasons and for public safety. We also discussed after that the lease agreement of operation of a concession at the Julie MacArthur Regional Recreational Center. This is something that the city had had an agreement with a past company prior, but they subsequently withdrew their offer for their proposal. So we discussed in length about what some of the challenges could have been about opening up an establishment in this area or this location. And we ended up passing a motion that would give staff the staff authority to initiate direct negotiations with further potential individuals and businesses who may lease and operate the concession. From that, Councillor McManaman brought up a point here that some ice had been removed from one of the west rink of the rec center. And we were noted that by the facilities manager, this allows for maintenance work to be undertaken as well as annual or semi-annual, I think, or tries. It's meant to do some line painting for lacrosse games as well. So it was just something that was in due time to have done. And that was our great day.
Any questions from Councillor Lemon?
A couple of questions. Number one, all the other water storage ponds around town, or stormwater storage ponds, I'm thinking of the ones up by Walmart and Seasons, they have a fence around them. This one, which is in I would say an area where you're going to get lots of kids, lots of younger people, because you have the Y, you have the rinks or lacrosse areas, and of course you have the track, etc. Doesn't have a fence. And to me,
So the question is?
why did we not put a fence there?
Thank you, Councillor Lemon. We actually discussed this at great lengths about it. Ms. Coulter will be able to go to further depths on it on the planning side of it, but it was we're deterring away from going to those old stormwater systems where you have that fence where it's how deep, where it would be dangerous. We've got in that pond up there was maybe maximum knee level, if that's not even supposed to be. It's a relatively low amount of water that's supposed to be pooling in there, and it's for a very short period of time. It has been brought to our insurer's knowledge, and that signage was all that was required.
Thank you.
That was my one question. The other question is getting some kind of food at the Julie MacArthur Rec Center. Did we put a lot of restrictions on what they can and can't sell? Was that part of the problem, or do we know?
Go
Through
ahead.
you, Your Worship, our joint operating agreement with the Y does indicate that healthy food choices would be available at the concession. And we have, as council is aware, gone to an RFP 3 times now unsuccessfully. So the recommendation is to allow staff some direct negotiations with an agreement that would come back to this council for approval.
Thank you. Good. You moved them, and
I will move the recommendation.
Okay.
Move the acceptance of the minutes.
So Councillor Dodds moved them now, so all in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Minutes of in-camera meeting, this is 12D1, held on April 13th, 2015. Councillor Kapke.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll move the approval of the minutes of the in-camera meeting held on April 13, 2015.
All in favor? It's carried. Thank you. Other business, Councillor Kapke, I think you're going first.
I'll move that the committee rise and report.
Are we doing other business first?
I'm sorry. We're not
Yep,
going to rise yet.
Yeah, we want to get out of here.
Okay, other business. My first item is about the Festival of Northern Lights, and I'm sure everyone in Owen Sound, as well as a lot of other communities that come to Owen Sound, have enjoyed the 27 years that the Festival of Northern Lights has been operating. However, they're lacking in some management for the Festival of Northern Lights, given the passing of Doug McKee, who was extremely dedicated to the festival. And so the festival is having an open house on May the 5th at 7 p.m. in the basement boardroom, and they're looking for anyone who might be interested at all in helping with the festival, whether it be setting up or tearing down or repairs and maintenance, new displays, all kinds of things that are going on. They'll be explaining all of the committees that work on the festival. I also wanted to recognize the huge volunteer work by Greg Black, who refurbished and redesigned an old sleigh, which is a horse-drawn sleigh, and it's just beautiful. So I'm hoping that we find a nice spot for that. And also want to recognize the work of Elaine Matheson, who is painting a huge display of Jack Frost, So we're hoping the 28th year can go on, but it certainly needs some help with that committee, and we're seeking some interest from the public on that. So May the 5th, in the basement boardroom at 7 p.m.
And questions from anybody? Good.
Okay, my second item is about chickens and eggs, and particularly laying hens. As we noted in the last council meeting, there was information that came to the bylaw committee requesting that the bylaw committee review the allowance of laying hens in backyards in the city. This is being looked at by the committee, and staff are getting all kinds of information from people. If you have some information on that particular item or interest in it or not interested in it, please send in your information to City Hall, and the committee will be gathering all of that information and making some recommendations to council. And although I love eggs and I love chickens, I want to thank probably one of my colleagues for giving me some shake and bake to have with my chicken. So I don't know who it was, but thank you very much.
I'm innocent.
Anybody want to volunteer? All right, great, thank you. Councillor O'Leary.
Thank you, Your Worship. On the 8th of May, I'd like to issue a challenge to my fellow councillors and Mayor Body. We are going to load up on the big bike for the Heart and Stroke. We're going to ride from City Hall to the Bay Shore Community Center. And Councillor Levin, don't worry, you don't have to pedal. You just have to get on the bike. I've got a plan in place. We're going to put Councillor Dodd and Councillor Gregg at the front, feed them each a loaf of bread before we leave, and we'll go right to the Bay Shore. And so I need everyone to make a small donation to the Heart and Stroke, register for the big bike event, and we'll do that as a team. Thank you.
Good, thank you. Councillor McManaman, Kiwanis.
Thank you, Your Worship. Following the big bike on May 8th, on Saturday, May 9th, the Kiwanis Club of Owen Sound is celebrating their 90th anniversary. And I just thought we should highlight that publicly. This club of approximately 60 members, 90 years in this community, most people, I believe, would be touched by at least something they've been involved with over the years, whether it's the Santa Claus Parade. They've been doing that since there's been a Santa Claus Parade. The Music Festival, which I believe, the Grey County Kiwanis Music Festival, which I believe is in its 85th year. So that's a huge, touches many youth in our community. More recently, they've been involved with activities, sponsorship involving the soccer complex, the Harrison Park Accessible Playground, and most recently, the skateboard and bike park. So they also are involved in not as well-known helping. Their mandate is to help children, involves all children, and they have a smaller fund which they use to assist individual children with individual needs. They look at the greater good and also individuals. So I just wanted to highlight the club and the good they've done in the community for 90 years. A lot of that money they raise is through their Whispering Pines campground, but another one is the Kiwanis Kitchen food trailer. So if you're at an event and you see the Kiwanis food trailer, all that money is going right back into the community and run by volunteers. So congratulations to the Kiwanis Club on 90 years of service.
Good, thank you.
And I didn't mention, my goodness, thank you, Councillor Kepke. I didn't mention Christmas tree sales, which I should have. They've sold Christmas trees for many, can't believe I forgot that one, for many, many years. Yes, they've also sold Christmas trees. So that's another fundraiser of theirs, and if you can need a Christmas tree, that's a good spot to buy it. So that was my first item. The second one, Your Worship, everyone will notice on their desk the Community and Summer Activities Guide. A number of years ago, we used to have two guides. Now we've rolled it into one. This is available online at owensound.ca. It's at our tourist office, also here at City Hall. It was mailed out with a recent edition of the Sun-Times as well, or sent out. I think I've nailed it. Anyway, this is the guide. If you're interested in what's going on in summer in Owen Sound, this is the guide you need to read. It also talks about all the different community groups and clubs and organizations that are in in Owen Sound and region, and it is quite an extensive list. But if you're ever wondering about a group to join, a organization you might be interested in, it will be in this guide. So, and just talking about, it also talks about seniors' activities throughout the region, swimming lessons, hockey camps, summer soccer camps, all of our parks, our trails network, explains ice rentals, museums, anyway, on and on and on. A section on our library and what it involves, all this different city services the city does provide. So anyway, just a great resource for anyone. Nice picture of council in here as well, in case you're looking for that. Anyway, great resource guide, and I would highly suggest anyone to get this guide, look through it. It talks about, oh, sorry, and I left out the summer, all the programming that goes on, major events this coming summer. And there's a list with, I don't know how many are on this list, 50 different things that take place this summer in the city. So there's lots to do. Pick up the guide and have a look. That's all, Your Worship. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Deputy Mayor Wright, Hospice.
Thank you very much. Yes, this coming Sunday is a walk for hospice down at the park, and if anyone is interested in sponsoring, I have a sheet here. I'm not able to walk, but I do have a sponsor sheet if anybody's interested, and I'm asking for support for that. May I just mention one other thing, and that is that don't forget that May 7th is the Warden's Forum. I'm not sure how many people are going, but I'm going to drive down. If anyone wants a ride, I'd be quite happy. Or if we could carpool from the back of City Hall or something, that would be a good idea.
I think we rode with Councillor Wright last year and we survived, so yeah, we may take you up on that again.
Okay.
I remember it being very fast.
I will like the wind.
Councillor Lemon, you're next.
Yes, Your Worship. The federal budget came out recently, last week. And one of the things that's been on our radar for a couple of decades, I guess, at this point, darn near, and that is dredging the harbor. And I would therefore make a motion that a letter be sent to our MP, Larry Miller, requesting information on funds in the budget for harbor dredging, as per the request of the City of Owen Sound, which we want that to go ahead. It needs to go ahead. And I think it's a good and fair question to ask, is it in the budget? Because I've read everything I can get on the budget, and I can't figure out whether it's there or not. Because it seems to be they have various funds. I know there's a lot of money for Atlantic Canada. Well, it would be nice if there was some money for Central Canada, too. So my motion is that a letter be sent to Larry Miller asking him, is there money in the budget for dredging the Owen Sound Harbor? And if so, what is the process?
Mr. Ritchie, maybe you'll know this. It's my understanding that the issue isn't funding, that the funding's been available. It's that we haven't got approval for the divestiture to get the harbor dredged. I just want to clarify.
Correct, Your Worship. But we can certainly pursue with our local member if there is something directly there, but I believe the funding is in place. It's a matter of divestiture.
I thought they were going to go ahead at one point with the dredging. From some remarks I heard on the radio that they would go ahead with the dredging.
You've moved that we write a letter and ask the question, so
Yeah.
all in favor? That is carried, so we'll write the letter. Good, thank you. Last two things that I have, just very briefly, I wrote out a list of some of the things that I've done in the last 2 weeks, focusing on the main three. Mr. Ritchie and I had the opportunity last Friday to meet with Mayor David Henderson and City Manager Bob Castman from Brockville, who came and toured the city. We have twin cities in all over the world, and we don't have one in our own province, but I think this would be one. Similar, very similar population, very similar budget, very similar issues that they're facing with regard to growth. They're ahead of us in some things. They have made a decision to move towards a composite fire department. They have made the decision to ask the OPP for a costing. We've got the opportunity to sit and watch and see how badly they get, no, I'm going to reword that, to see how they make it through the process on that. We are ahead of them. We've got double ice surface. They're just looking at doing things like that. It was really fun. Ms. Coulter came in and went out and did a presentation, as did Mr. Furness. They do a lot of things similar to us and not the same, and they made a lot of notes. We toured the police station. Very much look forward to meeting with them again and a couple of other municipalities that they're aware of that are in a similar situation as us. We'll meet them at the AMO conference in August for sure, if not before. And it was a really, really positive meeting, and so I wanted to share that with you. Special occasion on Saturday, the 17th, I attended and brought greetings from the city to Dr. John Rowe, who some of us know had a business across the street, optometrist from City Hall here. 94 years of age. He was a member of the 1st Special Services Force, which was known as Devil's Brigade in the Second World War, made up of 800 Canadians and 1,000 American troops, moved through Italy and into lower France or southern France. Very secretive. They weren't talked about for a long time. They just were awarded a congressional medal from the American Congress for those that are still alive. It's interesting when you talk to Dr. Rowe and people like that, they immediately said, oh, I didn't do much. And just the fact that they're there and they did what they did and they went through what they did is pretty amazing, and I can't help but think how we get to do our job here and how it's been affected by people like Dr. Rowe and many others that didn't come home or have come home and aren't around anymore. What a difference they made to our world and how it affects us sitting here at the council table. So that was a pretty special day. Monday the 20th, I attended Georgian College for a food entrepreneurship conference and had the opportunity of sitting down with the president and CEO of Georgian College, Mary Lynn West Moynes, for just a general discussion of things that are on their radar that we should be informed of, and things that are on our radar that we're trying to keep her informed of, so we can keep working with Georgian College and support the campus and keep it growing here in Owen Sound, because that's a big economic booster in the long run. For people coming here, becoming educated, some of them staying here and perhaps setting up jobs here. So several other things, but those are the main things that I wanted to share with everybody. The other item on our list is my list is a letter that we received today from the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing. It came in around noon hour this morning, thanking us for our request for funding under the Ontario Disaster Relief Assistance Program, ODRAP, to compensate for costs associated with severe winter weather in January-February 2015. ODRAP is designed to provide assistance to communities affected by sudden, unexpected natural disasters such as flood or tornado. Unexpected, yes. Natural, yes. Maybe we weren't sudden. ODRAP is provided when damage to private property and municipal infrastructure is so extensive that the cost of recovery would exceed the financial resources of a community. I'm advised the municipalities' identified costs associated with the water main breaks are estimated to be $1 million. I have concluded that the amount of damage is not beyond the financial capacity of your municipality to manage. As well, although the winter is severe, infrastructure repairs arising from cold weather are not an unexpected natural disaster. As a result, I've determined that Owen Sound City of Owen Sound will not be declared a disaster area for the purposes of ODRAP. Should you or council have any questions about ODRAP requirements for eligibility, please contact Mr. Roger Moyer, manager of our ministry's local government branch. Signed, best regards, from Ted McMeekin, the minister. So, comments? Go ahead.
I just love that line. I have concluded that the amount of damage is not beyond the financial capacity of your municipality to manage.
Didn't ask any questions to get there. Councillor Lemon?
Well, to say the least, I'm very, very unhappy. I believe the total is actually over $1 million now, is it not?
Your worship, my last estimate was in excess of $1 million, but we're still counting.
Okay.
We do have two very sizable reconstruction projects that will have to go forward this year, which will add to the total.
At this point, I'd like not to, I haven't got a motion at this point, but I'm trying to think of some way we can get their attention, like shutting the water off to the provincial offices or something, because the pipes froze. This city just went through, I was going to say absolute hell, and I guess hell froze over, and that's the problem. I've never seen in all my years in the city the kind of damage that we sustained. It was huge. And I applaud what our workers did to remedy the situation. And I'm thinking a few years ago when some people made some mistakes or something happened anyway in Hanover, or Walkerton rather, the province was there handing out the money and they even got a new business there as a result of it. And yet when we make a humble request for a reasonable amount, we get turned down flatly. I can't figure out exactly what to do yet, but I think we should all think about it because I didn't realize he'd gotten a response from them, and ask them what they expect is an emergency. I mean, if we burn down half the city, well, that's to be expected. Buildings do burn down. I mean, that's the logic that's in here, and it's illogically logical.
Thank you. Other comments, observations? Councillor Kepke?
Thank you, Your Worship. I think it might be prudent for us to reply back expressing our disappointment in their conclusion and asking how they did assess our municipal's financial capacity to manage this, when they didn't ask any questions or where we were getting the money from. I think it's only fair that they reply to something like that.
I'm going to come back to you in a minute. Councillor McManaman?
Your worship, and I would agree with the comments that the best line in here is I have concluded the amount of damage is not beyond your financial capacity to manage. I have concluded that the province is in the process of passing the buck. We heard from the Premier, who said we'll hear from the Minister of the Environment. We heard from the Minister of the Environment and said you'll hear from the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing. We heard from the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing that he's concluded that this is within our capacity to manage, pointing out that our reserves, which we built up over many, many years, were wiped out in about a 3-month period, pointing out that, as Mr. Becking has just said, we're at $1 million now with 2 large projects to go. We're going to be well over $1 million when this is all said and done. That will be beyond our capacity, certainly beyond our current reserves to do anything about. Where is that money going to come from? The utilities are supposed to be self-supporting. I guess we'll have to borrow it from the general tax levy, increase taxes. Anyway, I know this is a discussion for another day. The point being, I think this letter is not acceptable, nor should we accept it. I think we should request an immediate meeting with the minister to, as Councillor Kepke has said, to perhaps explain why the damage, the sudden, unexpected disaster that we experienced is perhaps beyond our capacity to manage. And even though, if we're looking for anything, the minister clearly states that in the ODRAP funding, we are not eligible. Perhaps there's other discussions we should have. Is there other funding mechanisms that could be available? to us. Because I'm not certain at all from this letter that the minister fully understands the situation that we are in or are going to be in once this financial, on top of the weather disaster, the financial disaster that's going to be following shortly. So anyway, I'd be willing to move a motion if that's...
Just hold on
Sure.
maybe for a minute. We'll
Yep,
go from
thank you.
others. Councillor Dodd, you were next. Brian?
It's funny, when we got this letter, I think everyone highlighted the same area here. I might not be as polite as both everyone else has mentioned here. It's rather offensive to hear the fact that it says that that it's not beyond our financial capacity. It is beyond our financial capacity. $1 million to our community is a large amount of money, and obviously that, when we filed for this, that wasn't enough for it, so I would be in full support of whether it be Councillor McManaman's or Councillor Kepke's motion here, because obviously there's a lot bigger issue that we need to really direct to them. That's a big chunk of money, and there's only so many people here that can pay for it, and obviously we can see what's going on in our municipality, that's not just floating around our back pocket.
Councillor O'Leary?
Councillor McManaman sort of touched on it, but I think it's the first time in 80 years we had temperatures this cold, and it is unexpected. So I don't know where he got that from. So I think that part should be addressed in the letter as well. Like, I don't remember having frozen pipes like this ever before, have we? So it was totally unexpected.
Mr. Ritchie, we're required to do an asset management plan by the province. And we've done the linear asset management plan, which is roads, curbs, sidewalks, bridges, cul-de-sacs, water, wastewater, storm sewer.
That's correct, Your Worship. We've done the water and wastewater, correct?
We've done water and wastewater, but not storm.
Not storm, okay. And to meet our plan, we're supposed to be putting how much aside annually?
I would have to revisit the plan, Your Worship, to talk about water and wastewater only, but as I recall, it was roughly the assets we had categorized, I believe we were roughly $3 million short annually.
That we were short. So to meet the plan that we had to give to the province, we are required to put approximately $3 million more annually than what we're putting in right now. And that would be what percentage tax per year increase?
Approximately a 10% increase.
So
Your
something
Worship,
like a
a little bit more.
10% increase, but yet we've got the ability, and we took 8 to 10 years to build up $1 million, $1.1 million in reserve, and it goes out the window in, what's it been, 9 weeks? 9 or 10 weeks?
To put some perspective on it, Your Worship, our water revenues are approximately $6 million a year. So this cost at $1 million is a
1.6.
significant increase to those rates to recoup them in 1 year if it's left on the ratepayer.
Quickly, Councilor Lemon.
Your Worship, right in the middle of this is the most stupid double talk I've ever seen. He says, as well, although the winter was severe, which we certainly know, infrastructure repairs arising from cold weather are not an unexpected natural disaster. So when the tornado hit Godrich was helped, and it should have been. But that's not an unexpected natural disaster. Nobody expects natural disasters by their very nature, like the earthquake that has taken Nepal. Yeah, they're in an earthquake zone, but that doesn't mean they're expecting it. I really take umbrage with the attitude. I think that, I don't know where he comes from. I kind of think probably Toronto. But if this was Toronto and they had the percentage of frozen pipes that we had, there'd be all kinds of money for this.
So I'm going to go back to Councilor McManaman for his motion.
Thank you, Worship. Thank you, Worship. I would move that we request an immediate meeting with the minister, a letter be sent to the minister requesting an immediate meeting to discuss the matter further. As far as the information you put in the letter, I would leave that up to yourself and staff to determine. The unexpected nature people talk to it, or the severe winter. Normally, we have between 20 and 30 services frozen during the year. Last year, we set the record at 65, and this year we're at 320. So I'm not sure if that's unexpected, severe. Well, I would call it unexpected, severe, and sudden.
I think the key part of that is going to see if there's other monies that can be available.
Yep, thank you.
Okay, to that motion, any further discussion? All in favor? Great, thank you. I think that concludes other business. It does. Motion that the committee rise, if you're ready.
I'll move that the committee rise and report.
Great, thank you. All in favor? Carried. Formal session, number 15, resolution.
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor O'Leary, that the action taken in Committee of the Whole in considering public meetings, deputations, public question period, matters arising from correspondence, reports, matters tabled, motions for which notice was previously given, and other business be confirmed by this council.
All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. 15, 16, notices of motion, which there are none. New business by resolution, which there is none. Bylaws, please.
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor O'Leary, that bylaw numbers 2015-051, 052, 053, 054, 055, 056, 057, 058, 059, 060, and 061 be passed and enacted.
Great, thank you. All in favor? That is carried. Great, thanks, everybody. It concludes our business. We're adjourned. Thanks, council.